Are you looking to finally master Notion? You've come to the right place. Last year, I released a video with 99 Notion tips that went absolutely wild here on YouTube. But a lot has changed since then. So here are 117 Notion tips to make you an absolute Notion pro. Most of these are completely different. So even if you see the previous video, there are more than 80 new tips here. And to make the video easier to navigate, I've broken it down into 7 categories. First up, aesthetics, so how you can make Notion pretty. Second, functionality, how you can build really cool stuff in Notion. Number 3 covers efficiency hacks, so everything that makes using Notion much easier and faster. Number 4 is all about using Notion as a team. And number 5 is about supercharging Notion, so all about pushing it to the limits. And then we have the 2 new categories compared to last year, Notion AI and Notion Calendar. Within each category, we start with the easier tips and work our way to the really complex ones. And for specific tips, I've actually also already recorded in-depth tutorials. You'll find all of these in the video description. Now, let's kick things off with Notion aesthetics. These tips will help you design better looking Notion workspaces. Because if something looks good, you're much more likely to actually use it. Number 1, quickly switch between light mode and dark mode. This has probably the biggest impact on how your Notion looks. To change this, you want to go to your settings. So in your sidebar, and then towards the bottom, you find the system settings. And here under your personal account, my settings, you see appearance, and I currently have it set to light. You can switch it to your system settings or to dark mode. Also, you can press Command-Shift-L on Mac or Control-Shift-L on Windows to quickly switch between those if you want a shortcut. Number 2, add emojis anywhere. This tip actually works in any program, not just in Notion. But yeah, if you want to insert emojis pretty much anywhere, you can use Control-Command-Space on Mac or the Windows key plus the dot on Windows to open the emoji keyboard. So that's how it looks like. We get our emoji picker, and now we could, about Notion mugs, can add this emoji. We can add here for our story, right? We can also search for it. We can add a megaphone, and that way, just spruce up the page and how it looks. Number 3, get custom emojis and icons for Notion. You probably already know that you can also assign an icon to any Notion page, either a default emoji, one of Notion icons, or a custom upload. But ever since a recent update, we can also save these custom emojis and really create our own unique icons. So here we can, after we drag something in or I wanted to upload something, can now say, please add this to our workspace library. Let's call this our official mug. Click on save. And now whenever we on another page want to upload emoji, we have this one saved. So anyone in our workspace can use this. You can find your custom emojis after you've uploaded them in the general emoji picker. So you want to search for the name that we added to it. Oops, it was mug. And there you see it. We have it in a line with all our other mugs. Number 4 is an Easter egg for a rainbow cat. All right, the jury is still out whether this one is useful, but see what happens if you press up, up, down, down, left, right, and then B and A. All of a sudden, we get this weird little rainbow cat flying across our screen. It's a little Easter egg in Notion, very fun. Probably not the most used for your Notion designs, but if you want to impress a friend, it's quite useful. And if you need to get rid of it afterwards, because it will just keep going, simply press Command-R to refresh your page. And after you do that, it will disappear. Number 5, use one color per page. In Notion, we have a total of 10 colors available, and you can access them by highlighting any text and then clicking here on the text color icon, and you see the 10 text colors and the corresponding 10 background colors. Alternatively, we can click on the 6 dots, right, and change the color for the whole block here. Now, while we have 10 colors, I would recommend to start and stick with 1 per page, because this will help you create a lot more cohesive looks than if you have, different colors for every single element. Number 6. Combine your single color with a specific background. To do so, click on the 6 dots and then set the background color to yellow. Now, you might sometimes realize that it actually sets now your text color back to black, but you can simply highlight the text and then go on the text color menu and here set it to yellow. And now you have like the yellow, main font color on a yellow background for a nice cohesive look. Just as a reminder again, right, if you were to go simply to the 6 dots and then apply the color here, you can only choose one of them. So you need to use this combination of applying the background to the whole block and then applying the actual font color to the text to get this, layout. Number 7, experiment with capitalizing your headers. Now this look isn't for everyone, but it's certainly worth experimenting with it because it can draw a lot of attention to your heading in a nice way. Basically what you want to do is you want to capitalize every single letter. So instead of writing our story like this, you want to do our story like this. And you want to have one space between every letter and 3 spaces to indicate, a normal space. And that way, right, again, you just get this slightly different look than the other elements on your page to, break up a Notion page and add some additional styling elements. Number 8. Use the code formatting to draw attention to text. This is probably one of my favorite styling shortcuts in Notion. And it involves turning something into code. So when you highlight something, you can click here on this mark as code option or simply press Command E for the shortcut. And it gives you this background, a little bit of padding and a slightly different font. Now, by default, it will always be gray on red, but you don't have to stick with it. So you can highlight this and then you can go in right and say, actually, my, the one color I picked for this page is yellow. I want to bold it maybe also. And now you have this really nice, like a sort of tag-like look to highlight specific elements in your page. And you can not just use this within text to draw the eye, but you can also use it for the headings. So again, same idea, right? We can press Command E here. And now we have here the yellow styling and we have this slightly gray background. We actually don't want that, but we know how to solve it, right? We simply highlight it and then we say, in terms of the background, please give me actually the yellow background. And now we have also, right, like this other type of font on our Notion page with it. Otherwise, not possible to get to, again, right, just highlight these sections. Number 9. Take a page out of the playbook for better UI and use light gray text whenever you explain something. Particularly on text-heavy pages like this one, this is a great trick to de-emphasize certain elements and create a better balance. In order to do so, simply highlight the text and then go here and pick the light gray text color. And you see, if we do this for our different elements here, right, if we apply the light gray text color everywhere, we get now a much nicer look that emphasizes the actual point, right? In this case, our best-selling Notion mugs, and then just has some slight context below it. Another great place to use this usually is in the little text that goes directly below a headline, right? Or here for our current product lineup, that was probably something that we could de-emphasize as well. And again, just makes it a bit more balanced. Number 10, toggles, toggles, toggles. Toggles are my second most favorite feature when it comes to Notion layouts. They're really handy, again, when you want to break up a page and make it feel less overwhelming. So for example, here, right, we have a long block about our story, and maybe we don't need to see that all the time. So what we can do is we can simply go in here, and now we can add type / toggle and get a toggle list. This gives us this little toggle, and we can just say, learn more. We can actually combine this also with our previous tips, right? We can either highlight this as, code if we want to draw the eye to it, or probably we want to do the opposite, right? We want to just like have this in little gray in case someone needs to find out more. And we can simply take all these elements and drag it behind it. Now we can open and close this toggle when we need to, read more about our story, or we can hide it. And we can do the same with whole sections, right? Besides our general toggle, we have also toggle headings. So in order to do so, you can, for example, click on an existing heading on the 6 dots and say turn into. And here we have now our normal headings, but down below we have our toggle headings. So we can say this is actually a toggle heading, and now we can collapse it and expand it, and everything will be inside. Plus, one other thing to be aware of is, as you can see, since I applied the background formatting right to the headline, this will actually apply to everything inside of this toggle, giving it this little call out like look on our page. And if we do this now for all our other headings, right, that are less relevant, we can tidy up this giant long page with text into something a lot more manageable. Number 11, use callouts to break up your page. Now, this is my favorite feature for layouts because it's so versatile. First, we're going to use it to simply highlight something, right? So we could go here and type /callout. This is pretty much the default look. We have an emoji, right? We can sort it out, for example, for our custom emoji, and then have a background color and could simply drag our regular content in here, right? And say something like about Notion mugs, could even remove the main heading and then just have this here at the top. Could also insert right at any point within like a big chunk of text, just to, again, right, call out and call the attention to this element. But we can take things also one step further and use callouts to actually lay out our whole page. In order to do so, let's simply type callout. And this time we want to click on the emoji and we want to remove it. And this gives us a much cleaner look. If we combine this now by setting the background of this to default, we just get a nice little block with this subtle outline around, which can be really nice in order to style the page. For one, we could use this in a 2-column layout, right? Again, another great tip for better page design by typing /column and then picking an amount of columns on the page. So for example, 2. We can now add this to one of them and then we can duplicate it, moving a bit quicker here, but we will go through all these shortcuts later in this tutorial. And now we have these 2 sections here and we could put any context in here, right? So we could say, for example, here, these are our headquarters, and in the other one, we have some other information. So we can, use it for a little bit of information, but we could also take it a few steps further, right? And actually, for example, move the whole element in there, right? We could go ahead here and say, well, not columns, call out, take basically our whole page that we have here down until here, move it all into this one big column, and now have this little, again, like outline around the page, which just adds that little design touch that can make all the difference when you build your Notion pages. Number 12, use Notion buttons for navigation. To do so, let's add simply 2 columns here, and then in the left one, our first button, and this one will be the button to maybe go home, right? Maybe this is our general information page, but we want to help people find back their way to the main company page, so let's call this go home. We can click on here to add a little icon, and this might be, if we keep it in yellow, let's switch that, and let's add an arrow that goes back. And then here as the action, we want to set open page URL of home. And there we can click on this little gray option and now search for something, for example, our Notion Max home. That should be hopefully a page in here. Yeah, there it is. And now we can set instead of center peak to full page. If we click on done now, this creates basically this navigation effect, where the second we click on this button, it brings us to this, well, empty demo page, but you get the gist. And then to complement things, if you have this 2-column layout and another page, right, we can then just add like the view next page button with a different icon to indicate the standard navigation on this page. Number 13, use images for navigation. So here we have a nice product grid that takes into account a lot of the design principles we already talked about, right? We have one single color, we have this little call out around it, we have even a de-emphasized list section. And we can now use these images, right, for navigation, because we might link to the actual product page. So in order to do so, we click on the 3 dots, and then here we can say add link. In this case, I will simply add a link to my own personal web page, right? But you could do pretty much any page. And now you see the second you've added a link here, it gets this little hover that indicates that you can go there, right? If I hover over a normal image, it doesn't give me that. Here, it gives me this, indicates also where it goes, right? And if I would click on this, I jump right to that page. And that works, of course, both for outside web pages, but also for your internal Notion pages. So if you have your product page inside Notion, you can also use this to quickly jump between elements and further enrich the layout of your page. Number 14, use simple tables to structure information. Simple tables are great to quickly display information and be able to compare it. So here we have our product details, right, simply as plain text, but if we were to use it in a table instead, this is how it would look like, much easier to scan. In order to do that in Notion, simply type /table, and this will give you the simple table. And now we can have our columns here, right? We can add another one by clicking on here. We can make it fit the whole width of the page by clicking here, right? Which will automatically expand different columns. We could, of course, manually resize them if we wanted to. And then we can click on the 3 dots to give this, on the options to give this a header row or a column row. So let's stick with the header row, and then we can have our different categories here, right? So column A, column B, and column C. One additional tip, if you want a little bit extra style, you can highlight the specific column, click on these 6 dots, and then actually change the color. So you could say that this one color, right, I would like to format in yellow. Or if you want to have divider columns inside it, right? So for example, if you have a very big table and you want to say, right, so we want to visually distinguish between them, we could just take this one, right, and as the color add the gray background, right, and now we have this sort of division here between it. Of course, this is currently overriding it, but we could change it for this specific one to also be then gray. Number 15, ask Notion AI to do the heavy lifting for you. We'll talk a lot more about AI later, but this is just very useful in this context. If you have any of these situations, or if you wonder how could I display this in a table, you could simply highlight your test and then ask AI, please format this as a table, right? If you have specific instructions as for the table, you could do that. But oftentimes, if you're not entirely sure how it could look like, just throwing it in there and asking it to organize it will do wonders. Number 16. Keep your Notion sidebar organized and collapsed. Because as you can see here in this Notion demo workspace of mine, it can get cluttered very quickly. But this happens particularly if you just always create new pages, right? Like clicking here, and they will all just stack here on this top level. Since Notion doesn't have any built-in folders, you want to be careful to not overload the sidebar. My favorite way to do this is to simply create 1 or 2 catch-all pages that will contain the others. So you see, I've already started here in this HQ page. I have a lot of pages in. Now, this is of course also not perfectly sorted. You would go ahead then, right, and probably either create actually a database to sort them in, or create certain categories, right, where you might have some private pages, right, and you might stack them below here, and then some other pages. But so like already starting to collect them in these sidebars, in few top level pages, like in folders, is a great step. So to do so, we can simply take any page that we have, right, for example, this new page, and move it into the HQ. Move this here as well, Learn Notion, Project Management, right? All of these can be tidied up here and then moved into like further subfolders if we need to. And that way we have a much cleaner look here on the side. Now, we want ideally keep this like to 5 or 6 top level pages, not more. And then if we have certain pages that we need to access all the time, so for example, the new Notion features here, right? We can simply go in and favorite them. And this creates this new section here in your sidebar of favorites. And again, try to limit it to 3 to 5 favorites of logged pages that you use the most. That's already a much cleaner look. Last but not least, for the sidebar, you can also actually change the order of these things, right? So you could drag private to the very top, although favorite having those at the top makes the most sense. And then if you wanna, if you have a lot of pages and you wanna limit how many are shown, you can click on these 3 dots. And here you see you can limit this to only 5 items or to everything, right? By default, Notion starts hiding them after 5, but you can override it by always clicking on these 3 dots. Number 17, pick your favorite Notion look. We already talked about light mode versus dark mode and using one color per page to really get a visual identity. But there's one more setting that you can modify in order to really make Notion your own. And that is the actual font. So if you click on the 3 dots in the top right corner, you see that besides the default font, which I have here, we have also a serif font and then this mono font to choose from. And this really alters the way Notion looks. Now, if you prefer one of these other 2 looks, or even one of these looks in combination with a small text, you can set it here on the top side, but this will only apply to this specific page, right? So if I go to another page, you see it doesn't persist. So you can't just say all my Notion should look like this. So what do we do? Do we always have to go in and manually adjust this for everything? No, there is a better way, and here's how it works. In order to do so, we want to create a new top level page in our private section, right? We've already organized it, so now let's add one more to this and let's pick the table option. We're working with databases now and we want to create a new table and we can simply call this pages. We can also give this an icon, right? If we want to stick with the color scheme, right? So let's go to icons, let's go to purple since our other side icons are purple and pick a folder. And then here, this is the trick. We have like a database and we don't need to add any other properties. We can simply create pages in here. But what we'll do is we will set up a simple database template. This talk, jumps a bit ahead. We talk about templates later. But for now, all we want to do is we want to call this new page. And what we want to do is here on the 3 dots now, we can say, well, please always give me the mono look. This is the one I prefer. And then we can click out of this. We can click it down here below. We can say set default. And now whenever we create any page here, it will automatically have my new settings. Right, so this new page, if I open it up, you see that it automatically is set to mono. You can also create new pages by simply clicking here, and this then enforces that everything has this look and we don't have to apply it every single time again from scratch. Number 18, make things full width. By default, Notion always gives you a lot of white space around the center part, which looks very nice if you just have text like this. But particularly if you want to build dashboards and want to use the whole width and use columns in these layouts, this can be quite annoying. So in order to get the full page space, you can click on the 3 dots and then click on full width. Just like with the font settings that we talked about, this is though something that you need to do on a per page level. So if you create a new page, it won't carry over. But of course, we can use the same trick as for the font type. So we can go back to our database layout, click on the dot down here, click on the 3 dots to edit the template that we've set up, and then go here and make this full width. And now everything that we create through this database template will automatically be full width as well. Number 19, hide database titles for a cleaner look. Whenever you use a linked database view to pull information in from a main database onto your page, you often see that it shows you this page title like this. And to just make it look cleaner, you can click on the 3 dots and hide it. It looks much better in my opinion. If you want it back because you prefer it for navigation, you can click on the 3 dots and then under layout, you can see here show database title. We can toggle it on and off again. Number 20, super narrow columns. By default, all Notion properties except for checkboxes have a minimum width, right? So if you try to resize them, there's just no way to go smaller than this unless it is a checkbox, of course. But if you hold down the option key while resizing, you can actually make it much, much smaller. And that way get super, super narrow columns also if you don't use a checkbox. Sometimes it's not very useful like here, but oftentimes it's quite nice to customize, like just how much you actually show. Number 21, empty view names. This is also really nice to make your looks on databases much cleaner. What you can do is you can click into your gallery view or wherever you have the name. You can click on rename and you can simply put one space in here. And then it disappears and you don't have anything in there. Combine this with the custom icon, right? So in this case for product, maybe we want like a folder icon, right? Or for here, for this news table, we want to, again, clear out it says table and then just get the megaphone for the news. It creates a much, much better look than if you have always the other elements there. The same is true for database properties in theory, right? You can also go in here and just put a space in. Although for database properties, I don't recommend that because oftentimes when you need to reference them later in automations, there's currently a little bug that when that doesn't have a name, it actually can't be really referenced. So better to have a name in here unless you absolutely want this minimal look. Number 22, use a visual design language for your database properties. This takes a moment to set up, but it will be a huge payoff, in particular if you have large database like this. So our task database, as you can see, we have currently all the default property icons, right? Which mostly means that we have all these arrows for all relations. And we have, for example, this default property and this tag sign here. Now, what I highly recommend is that you go through it and you actually make sure that you assign custom icons to all of them that help you quickly represent what it actually means. So for tag, my favorite one is to simply look for tag, right? That is very easily identifiable. For relations, I always would go with what it actually identifies. So for projects, for example, your project database, like tasks have typically this checkbox for me. Projects typically have the globe, so I actually go in there and then always, whenever I have this relation, assign this same icon. And that means that if I have a large database, right, parent task, for example, would be probably like an arrow that goes up, and subtask would be an arrow that goes down. And last one, let's do priority, right? Let's do like an actual alert one for this one, right? And that means you can now scan this quickly, visually, and it's much easier to identify what every property means without having to actually read the text. Just a little bit, but if you apply this across all your database and you always use the same principles, right? Tags are always this one, projects are always this, tasks are always this icon, it will make it much easier for you to quickly scan information. Number 23, use database layouts for a less cluttered look. Once you have larger databases, you probably know the issue. There are so many properties and you have to scroll past all of them to get to the actual page body that it can be quite distracting. And there's a lot of visual clutter. You can, of course, hide these properties, right? You can say, okay, priority, that's something that I usually don't want to see. And then you, hide them below this toggle here, 3 more properties. But still, it's not perfect. Sometimes if you're working in a team, right, someone expands it and then it's confusing again. Or you might want to see things, but not always expand on everything. So what to do? Well, the answer to this is page layouts, a very recent Notion feature. So when you hover over the title of an entry in a database, right? So this is inside our task database, you see that we get this customized layout option. And once I click in here, I go into this new layout builder. And what I can do here is, first and foremost, the very easy fix to just reduce the visual clutter is to move my whole property group into the side panel. What this does is the second I apply this to all pages and we go back to our task, we see now that we have no properties left here, and instead we get this little view details button. I can click on it and now I have all my properties on the side, which means I can visit the actual page body down here together with all the information that is like sort of pinned here on the side. Much better. I can also then go one step further and actually customize it further and say, like, there's some properties that I always want to see and those I want to pin. So maybe I want to pin the assignee and I want to pin the status and I want to pin the due date, right? You shouldn't pin more than 3 or 4 properties, otherwise it gets cluttered again. But this is a good number, so we apply it to all pages. Now again, right, we have this much easier way to read the actual tasks that we have here. Plus, if we need additional information, we can always do so by clicking here or by expanding it through the page open or close page icon over there. Number 24, use property groups to show and hide relevant information. This will make our layout even better. Let's go back to customize layout. And now here, if we click on our property group, we can actually add sections here. This allows us to then take certain properties, for example, created by, created time, right? Elements that are more like supporting properties and move them out of the way. So let's do this. Let's say we have a new section. We have like, these will be our main properties. And then we can create another one with our helper properties. And now what I can do is I can, move the helper properties below, and then I can take these elements, right? So for example, task ID, I don't need that. Usually I don't need the last edit time, pull request, created time, and created by, all down here. Maybe even the AI summary. Maybe that's even something that I don't usually need. Maybe I need it just for, some other automations. And I click on apply to all pages. And now, right, if I open this, I have 2 things. I have my main properties and helper properties. I can collapse the helper properties all together so they don't annoy me. And I have now my main properties up here. Same idea if you have like a lot of properties that serve different purposes in your database, you could create sections for each of them, right? So maybe in your deal pipeline, you have, like the initial discovery and certain properties that belong to that. But later then when you work with someone, right, you have other properties and you can create it like that until Notion allows us to create different layouts for different entries. Now let's look at my functionality tips and how you can build really cool things in Notion. Number 25, sign up to my newsletter and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Number 26, use Notion to quickly publish sites. Here I have a page I want to share with the world because everyone should know how to care for their Notion mug. To do so, very easy, click on share in the top right corner. And then here you could actually invite someone as a guest to this page if they have a Notion account. Or if you want to generally share it with everyone, you can click on publish and then here on publish. And this gives you just within seconds this URL that you can share with everyone. Everyone can access it via Google, right? It's just like a general share link for G Drive. You can also set a certain link expiration, right? If you only want to have it there for a certain time. If you have duplicate is tempted on, they can also duplicate it. So in this case, since I don't want anyone to copy these care instructions, I will just turn this off. And now I can just go to any browser and look at this page on the web. Number 27, get a custom header for your Notion site. Published Notion pages also have additional design options that you don't have for simple internal Notion pages. If you go back to Share and then to the Publish setting, you see you have site customization. And once we open this, we get another customized builder similar to the database layouts. Here, what we can do is first we can decide what theme should apply. Because unlike your system settings, a page on the web will have different layouts. So like if you want to always have light mode, always dark mode, you need to set this here separately. Or you can allow the system to choose depending on what the user has it currently set to. You can also change the favicon, which is this little icon, right, that pops up in the browser when someone navigates to your page. And you can customize your header. Currently, as you can see, we have the name of our page, we have search, and then this made with Notion. But we can go actually here and say we don't want to see the breadcrumbs, we don't want to see search. If we have like a custom domain, we can also turn off the Notion watermark. And now we can actually add a header, so navigation. In order to do so, we need pages that are nested inside the page that we actually share. So here on how to care for your Notion page, I have 2 pages down below. I'll show them to you in a second. And we can add them now by clicking here and saying, well, buy more Notion mugs and our blog. Those should be the general options that people see up here, like in any normal website header. This will persist, right? So we have now our 2 pages that are down below here. If I go to view the site on the browser, in a second, we'll see we have that here, right? Like a little bit zoomed out. And then I have my 2 options here that I can navigate to by simply clicking to them. And if I click into any of these pages, you see the header persists, right? So I don't need to set it separately on these subpages. It's automatically there. Number 28, get a custom domain for your Notion site. When you first publish a site, you see that it will automatically give you a slug. And if you never adjusted this will actually be a very random one. But you don't have to stick with this. You can get something custom, like in this case, my Matthias from consulting.notion.site. And to do so, you want to click here on this dropdown, and then you can go on Manage All Domains. Here, you go to your settings, and under the settings, on the sites, you see now that I currently have 1 domain. Now, depending on your Notion plan, you can actually add up to 5 custom domains. If you don't have any, you can at least add 1, and then to do so, simply click on New Domain. You can enter, for your Notion domain, whatever it is that you want, and then you can claim it and you can switch between them. Alternatively, you can also connect your custom domain, right? So again, by clicking on New Domain and connecting a custom domain, you can have pretty much anything, and then it also removes the .notion.site slug, and you can remove the Notion watermark. Number 29, see all of your published pages. Same place as for domains, right? So in your settings and then sites, we see all the sites that we currently have published. In this workspace, we have quite a few templates published, which is correct, right? We want them there. But in case you, particularly if you work with a team, right, you might want to check, okay, who actually published the page, since when has it been published, and have one option to go from already here, right, disconnect all of them by going to the specific settings for that page, right, and unpublishing them so they don't expose data for longer than you actually want to. Number 30, master the add command. This is one of the most useful little tricks in Notion. Basically, whenever you type add in any page, you get a few options. 3 to be precise. You can either reference a date or a remind function. You can reference a person in your workspace, or you can link to a page. So what happens if we link to a date, right? If we link to today, this simply means that today shows today, tomorrow this will show yesterday, and then after a while, it will simply default to showing me the date, which is kind of a dynamic timestamp. Kind of nice. If you do this with the remind thing, right? If you write like remind tomorrow, and like 10, something like that, you will actually get a little notification option. This is a bit finicky, so I don't use this feature very often, but if you, want to be reminded through that, you could do so. Tagging a person is super useful because it will send them a little notification, right? So to let them know, hey, I pinged it here. Since this is in a private page currently, I also get this reminder to add that person to actually this page. It will pop up in the notifications, and I can say, Matthias, please have a look at this. Works both in a normal page, but also in the comment section of a page, right? I could also do this here, add person, and then do the same. Wherever you can type, you have these add commands. And last but not least, which is probably the most useful or like the most often used use for the add command, is you can search for any page in your workspace and link it. So remember we have, for example, like pages, right? So if I want to reference that, I can simply type add, say pages, and now I can link to that. And now I have this permanent link here that I can click on and quickly jump to it. super useful, particularly if you later use more and more databases to organize your pages, right? So they don't fill up your sidebar, and you still want to aggregate all the information on a single page, right? So if you have like 15 different documents, right, they are all in your database, and then you want to reference 5 of them on one page, with the add command, you can simply do so. Number 31, drag and drop files directly into the upload field. Wherever in Notion you have a files and media property, you can simply take any files and drag and drop them in there to upload it with one click. Then you don't have to click into it and, do the other clicks to choose a file, blah, 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 do all these steps. Plus, if you use the new database layout, right, and you can also get this nicer preview for files and media. To do so, under Customize Layout, you want to make sure that you click here on this plus and then add your files and media property as a large element to that page. And here you then see that you have, this slightly bigger preview than if you had it simply in the side here. Number 32, mass create database entries. If you want to create a lot of tasks or other database entries at once, here are 2 tips to make it quicker. The first one is through the normal database UI. You can simply click on new task, right? You have, sort of task 1 here. And now after you press enter, you can simply press shift enter, which will give you a new entry. You need to press then enter again to edit it. And now I can, call this task 2 and so on. And that way it's like, takes a moment, but I can still like fairly quickly add new entries. Much faster, however, is to simply go into your page, right? Have an unordered list or simply new lines, right? And just do like task 4, task 5, task 6, whatever you need to type. And then after you're done, you can simply select all your entries and drag them into the database. Now, here's one trick though. If you drag them into another entry, so where you see the whole blue thing is highlighted, they will just disappear because they will go into the body of this page, as you can see. So that's not what we want to happen. So when you drag and drop, you want to make sure that you see this line in between. That way you create new entries for all of them if you drop them in the database like this, and you can much quicker create a lot of tasks at once. Number 33, use Notion Home or turn it off. Notion Home is the thing that appears here in your sidebar at the very top, and it's sort of Notion's pre-built personal dashboard. It's quite nice for beginners. Oftentimes though, when you start setting up your Notion how you like it, you'll realize that you rather build your own dashboards. So it is a bit of a love-hate relationship with this element. If you want to keep it, you can click on the 3 dots in the top right corner, and then you can make sure that like the default start page is actually home, which means whenever you start using Notion again, right, if you launch up, it will pull that up. If you don't want that, you can change it to either your last visited page or, my personal favorite, the top bar page in the sidebar. Because that way it will usually pick your first favorite that you have here, right? If you, of course, reorder this like this, then it will pick the backend. But in favorites, you can also just drag and drop them around and then make sure that you, have control over the page that always gets added automatically. Otherwise, Notion Home will show you an overview over your recently opened pages. If you have Notion Calendar installed, which we'll talk about later, you will see your upcoming meetings here. You can set up the task view to pull in tasks. That one comes in a second as well. And then you have this learn and featured section. If you want to customize this, you can actually also click on the 3 dots and then say here under show hide widgets, turn certain ones off, right? I don't like learn, I don't like feature templates. Plus, if you're in a team environment, you will have 2 additional views here that I'll show you in a second. And here we go. Like magic, we have a suggested for you and a trending page. And this will try to identify, with the help of AI, what are the pages that people keep looking at in your workspace, so which ones are trending, and what, based on what you looked at, right, what you might want to check out next. Number 34, aggregate your tasks across databases in Notion Home. This is by far the most powerful feature of Notion Home. It's actually quite unfortunate we only can have it there and not as a general building block. Basically, in Notion, it's impossible to see entries that live in different databases in one and the same view. So as you can see, we have 2 task databases here, but we can't just combine it. Now, in general, my big recommendation is when you set up your Notion workspace to make sure that you have 1 global database per entry. So you should always avoid having 2 task databases. But there are some situations where you can't get around it, particularly when it comes to permissions. So for example, if you need to set up different task databases because you work with a lot of clients and they can't see each other's tasks. In this case, you might still want to be able to see them in one place. And to do so, we can click on the task database on the settings and then go to customize tasks. And here there will be under settings this option tasks. See your tasks in home. If you don't see it here, click on see more. And once we do that, we can then first quickly remove this. So we can re-edit. So we click back on tasks, and here it will now allow us to map our properties. So in order to be visible in home, we need an assignee, we need a status property, and we need a due date. So assignee and due date is automatically identified. And then for the status, we just click in here and say, well, it is the status property. And then let's say turn into task days. The same will go here, right? Task database, we go through it and we will say, okay, please here in customize task database, please add this to my home. Same responsible as this. We have a status property and we have a due date, and let's turn this into one as well. And now if we head back to our home, we will see that we have, like in general, the option to display this task view. I have it currently hidden, but you can again might go through 3 dots, show hide widgets, and then show my tasks. And now you see I have this centralized view, which pulls in entries both from my task database and from the tasks DB. You can then adjust the views, right? So you could say, I actually don't want to see this as a list, I want to see this as a board, whatever it is that you want to display it at, and you can have them all in one place. What's cool, if you now create a new task through this general view, you can in the top here switch where you want to actually add it to, right? To which of your task database. You see I have a bunch of task databases set up in this workspace. And that way you can easily enter it then to the place where it actually belongs. Number 35, pin a tab to make it permanently accessible. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you start using the desktop app for Notion because it's simply faster and it has a few really cool features. One of them is that you have the option to pin tabs for pages that are like just used a ton. So as you can see, I have already 2 pins. It gives you this slightly different look. You can simply right click any tab and then say, please pin this tab. And we'll turn it then into this little logo, right? Where if you have a page icon, it will just show that. Otherwise, it will just show the start of the page. Now, the really cool thing is even if you like click out of this, so let's say, for example, I have my YouTube pipeline pinned. If I click into any of these entries, right, and I open them up, instead of losing this pin, it simply creates a new page for me, which makes it much, much easier for you to, have your central few pages always accessible and then, avoid having just hundreds and hundreds of tabs, which I had before. Number 36. Log out of all devices at once. Just a very good security feature to be aware of. If you go to your sidebar and then to settings at the bottom, you can switch here on the settings to my account. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you see all the devices where you're currently logged in. So currently I have this like one device in the US, right? So I might want to log out of this one to make sure that no one misuses that. Whereas the other one, right, that's totally fine. I'm fine with keeping that. But just, like quick way to get out of all the accounts if you need to. Number 37, recover accidentally deleted elements. Remember our amazing Notion Max helper page? Well, it would be really unfortunate if someone by accident deleted a lot of stuff, right? So we could, for example, just highlight this and then it's gone. That's of course bad. If you notice it in the second, right, you can simply press Command Z and then it's there again. But what if you don't really realize maybe someone else in your team deletes it or you only come back a few days later? What else can you do? Well, if you delete a complete page, you can find it actually down below here in the trash. This is where your whole pages go. But of course, currently nothing is here because what I deleted is part of that page, right? It's not a page itself. In order to retrieve that, you want to click here in the top right corner and then on the 3 dots, and then you find the page history. So if we scroll down, we see updates and analytics and then version history. So under updates and analytics, we can simply see what happened, right? Someone removed this. So one way to do to get it back is to simply click on view version for this update. Or alternatively, you can go to version history. Both of them will show you the same thing. This overview of past edits of this page. Now, since I only created this page yesterday and just pasted everything in, currently I will only see these 37 things, but in a moment, we'll actually see this change. Just 1 second. All right, now it's here. So we have our current version history where it is deleted and we have the previous version history. And if we wanted to, we can click on any of these previous versions and click on restore, and then it will pull in all these blocks that we have there. Alternatively, you can actually also just copy elements from that page, right? If you have certain text and then paste it on your main page. Although that's less reliable, I would highly recommend to restoring just a previous version. Number 38. Recover deleted properties on a database. If you accidentally delete a property on a database, you need to recover them slightly differently. So let's say we by accident removed, tags. That's not good. We really needed it. But don't worry. What we can do is we can click on the 3 dots and then under properties, we have now this new area for deleted properties. And this will show you everything that ever exists on this database. And with just 1 click, you can restore it. And it also restores all the information that you previously had there. Number 39, freeze columns in big databases. Speaking of big databases with a lot of properties, even on a big screen, you will always be in a situation, right, where you need to scroll vertically on your databases. And that can suck because you sort of lose the context of what it's actually about. So you might not know what does Sprint 2 actually relate to here. So in order to solve this, you can right click any property and then click freeze to up to column. And now if I move to the side, you'll see that this part of the database stays in place. And we can go as far, right? We can say up to the due date we want to freeze. And that way we have always the most important information here, or we can scroll through the other elements. Now, very importantly, freezing up to a column will keep everything in front of it, in place. So you can't say, okay, freeze this column and ignore assignee. That doesn't work. You would need to move assignee, outside of it. And now if you say due date, freeze up to column, then you can, have it scroll like this. Otherwise, it's not possible. Number 40. Make your relation picker more useful. Wherever you have a relation to another database or to the same database, so in this case, right on the projects for our is blocking property, if you click into it, you can actually add additional context. And this is super useful, particularly for very long entries where you have a lot of things that might have similar names. In order to do so, simply click on the three dots. And now you can turn on all the properties from the main database here, right? So we could, for example, say who is actually the owner of a specific project, right? Or what is the status? Now we don't want to go overboard, right? Because we don't have a lot of space here, but that makes it much easier to navigate these properties, particularly if they are, very long. So particularly on tasks, right? If we go in here and we have a ton of tasks, we see we have probably too many properties on here. So let's turn off due, priority, and sprint. But now that we see the status and the person, right, it's easier to link to other tasks and make sure that we actually link to tasks that are for us rather than from people who are elsewhere. Number 41, understand master databases. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they start using Notion is that they sort of treat databases like pages in a spreadsheet. When you track your things in Excel or Google Sheets, and you create a new spreadsheet whenever you want to add a few more tasks. And then you end up with this situation where you have dozens of task databases, dozens of projects, and everything is scattered. That's definitely not what we want to have in Notion. Databases in Notion are so amazing because they allow us to have one central place for all of our tasks, for example, or for all of our projects. And then we can interconnect it with the other elements in our system. And we can build views and a lot of complex things on top of that, as intricate as you want to build your system or as simple as you want it to be. But at its core, we always need to follow one concept. For every type of element, right? So for a task or for a meeting, we want to have one database. So this is a sample setup, right, for a company where we have docs and meetings, OKRs, projects, tasks, and then our teams. And again, very important, right, that you don't set up different task databases for different teams. Everything should go into one task database if possible. And then you use a teams database instead and a relation to indicate, okay, does this task belong to sales or does this task belong to IT? Or if you have a more personal use case, and this is what your setup might look like. You have, again, projects and tasks, but one for all of them. And then you have personal goals. And if you want to, break down your different projects or tasks into personal goals, you can do that with relation. You don't need to create separate task lists for each of them. You have then your notes and you have your resources, and then you can have your books, articles, social media, and movies in there. So yeah, try to limit the number of databases, right? That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make. Like, I definitely fell into that trap. I had so many different databases for tasks and projects in the beginning, but simplifying your system, whether it's, for a more complex setup like this or just like simple projects and tasks at the end of the day, will greatly help you use Notion. Number 42, organize your master databases. When you set up your databases, you probably create them initially as inline databases. So by simply typing / and then database, right? Whatever you create here, this might be your task database, and then you set it up like that. But this is actually not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to make sure that these are full page databases. And that has to do with linked views that we will touch on later. But basically, what you want to do is you want to make sure that wherever you have one of your main databases, you want to click on the 6 dots and you want to say turn into page. And then once you have all of your main databases created that way, you want to move them into your backend, right? Or into one single location where you have all your master databases. That means you have now one single place where you can check for all your databases. Also in the future, right, if you forgot, did you actually create a database for that? You have them all in one single place and you don't accidentally delete them. Because later we're going to build a bunch of dashboard pages, right, that will collect our different views of databases. And if we then delete one, it's actually quite easy to accidentally delete a main database if it is a linked view, right? Just to show you the difference, if you type create and then take a linked view of a database, and say, let's take one of our many task databases, right? It indicates with this little arrow that it is only a linked view, so we can delete this without having any issue. But if we had our main database here inline, if we would delete that, we would delete it with all the content in it, which is not good. So keep your databases as main full pages stored away in your backend. And then when you click on it, right, you will also be able to tell the difference, because here there's no way to add any blocks below or above. The only thing that you can add is a little bit of a description if you need to, right? But this is fine because this is the backend view that you typically want to work on. It's just for you to set up your database structure. Number 43, set up master views in Notion. If you are on the main version of your database, which again is much easier to find if you organize all your databases in one single backend, you can set up these master views that you can reference everywhere else in your workspace very easily. So let's say, for example, on tasks, right? One thing that's super useful to see is just my task for the day in a nice minimal view. Let's click on plus here, and then let's say I want an empty view, and I want here a list view. What I want is to open the pages in Sidepeak, that is fine. I want the page icons, that is also fine. And now what I can say is, okay, I want the list view, and all I want to show here is the current due date, right? So I will say due date is today, is today. And then we want to also maybe show one other property, right? That's always nice in one of these type of views. I want to see the project that they belong to. Perfect. So now that I have this very simple view, which I can name today, right? And I can give it a little calendar icon just to make it easily distinguishable. I can go anywhere else in my workspace. Let's just take the backend, but let's pretend this is a useful dashboard that I'm building, and I can reference it. I can say /create. And on the linked database view, if I now take my task database, you see that I have all these views that I have pre-built on the main instance that I can quickly with just one click load. So rather than having to build this today view over and over again, I can just click it and reference it immediately. And again, this is only possible for views that we build on the main instance. If I build another view here on this linked database view, right? If I just duplicate this and call this tomorrow, and change the filter from is today to is tomorrow, and we try to reference it in another instance, right? We go through the same steps, create link view of database, tasks, we see it's not there. It needs to be created on the central pages, which again, another argument to have it organized like this, and then setting up all your most views once, so you don't have to rebuild them every single time. Number 44, speed up your workflows with database templates. We've already seen a little bit of the power of Notion data templates earlier when we used it to always apply the same font for every page. But now we can take it one step further. So here's an example where we have a content pipeline. And whenever we have a piece of content, we might want to go through certain steps. Now, rather than having to go in, right, and creating a new page and just saying, okay, this is a blog post, and then opening up this page and then, writing, okay, my blog posts always need to have a title, they always need to have a keyword, right? And they always need to have a CTA, and then, turning these with a few clicks into my headings, and then, adding. So we have a lot of repeatable content. That is the gist. And instead of having to do this every single time, we can simply create a template. In Notion, templates can be created on any database, and you do so by clicking on the blue dropdown. You can actually create this template anywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's on the main view of the database, right, or on a linked view. It will be shared across the system, but still, right, just as a good practice is to do it on your main instance. So let's go in here, and we see we've already created a few templates here, like a blog post template, and we can inspect them by clicking on the three dots and then clicking on edit. This will load it, and we see at the very top, you are adding a template, right? This tells me I'm not creating a new page, I'm currently editing a template, and my blog post template has currently these steps, which means whenever I apply this template, right? So if I go here, new page, and I say open this, and please choose this template, it will load all these blocks that I pre-created. And your creativity here is pretty much, there are no limits to it. When you create a new template, you can set anything. You can set a title, right? So this is a new template. You can also set an icon, and this icon will be loaded whenever this template is applied, which is a great way to get, a consistent icon structure here on the side. You can also have the template automatically apply cover if you want to, and you can set any properties, right? So if I want to say this new template, it should always start at the in review stage, and the channel should always be YouTube. Well, we can do so, absolutely no problem. And then we can add whatever we want to the body of the page. Let's actually open this as a full page here for a moment. We still see that we're adding a template. Anything that I add in here will be loaded whenever I apply this. And that includes other pages. So if I, for whatever reason, I wanted to go a few levels deep and said, okay, whenever we create this new template, there are like sort of three elements that we need to create. We need to create, we have a creative brief, we have a sponsorship agreement, and maybe we have, who knows, like a lead magnet. And I want to create all of these on separate pages. Well, I can simply do that, right? I can turn them into pages. I can assign them icons if I wanted to, right? Let's just get like creative brief, sponsorship, and lead magnet. And then whenever we use this on a new page, let's go in here, we see that this gets applied. And I get 3 new pages. This is super, super powerful, right? So whatever you do on a recurring basis, you can set up as a template. No, one word of warning though. When you do this, avoid creating databases inside your template. Because just like all the other content, this database will create it every single time, right? So a big mistake that I often see people make is that they set up their template and then they go in and then say, okay, I want a database here, right? I want to, in that database to organize my tasks, I create a new database, and this will be called tasks. Now, this means whenever I create, apply this template, we get a new instance of this task database. And that, as we already know, is bad because now we no longer have our central database. And you see now one of the reasons, right, why this is a bad structure. I have my tasks in here. Now I create a new template. I apply this again. It loads in, and I see that here in task, there's nothing, right? Here I have an entry in tasks, but here in this task list, I don't have it, right? So I need to create my task 2 in here, and I have never any easy way to see all my tasks in one place. So when you use databases in templates, make sure to always create your database elsewhere in your central backend and then pull it in with a link view, right? Use the slash create link view option, we're talking about that in a second, to pull that link view in, and that way you have one instance in your backend, everything is in sync, and you don't end up with hundreds of these little task databases. Number 45, make use of dynamic data in templates. In this example, we have a meetings database, and if we inspect the template that we already have on this meetings database, we see that we have a bunch of properties. For example, we have the date and we have the attendees. And currently they are all set to empty, right? So which means whenever we apply create a new meeting, we have to fill them out manually. But we can use dynamic data to make it a bit easier. If we click here into date, we see that one of the options, besides picking an actual date, is time when duplicated or date when duplicated, which means it simply fills in the date whenever we apply this meeting. Now, we can't do, unfortunately, like something for tomorrow, but still, it's better to have like today's date filled in than no date for something where we always want the date assigned to. And for attendees, we know that pretty much always I will be a part of this, right? If I'm the one who creates this meeting, then I'm definitely a part of it. If we already know that, new meeting has always the same view, we can of course add them there, but it's already a great step. Which means now if I create a new meeting, right, I actually have this meeting preloaded with the current date and me as an attendee. One other thing that you'll notice compared to before is here I just click on new page and it automatically already applies this, right? There's no need for me to actually click and select this. And that's because I've set this meeting as the default one. If you create a new template, empty will still be the default, which means you can choose, right? So if I set it back to this and we create a new page, we see it doesn't apply anything. I can open it up and then I have the option to pick it. But if you only have one template on a database, right, and there's no need to choose between several different layouts, then make sure you make your one default one, the default, so you can save one click every single time. Number 46, apply a template to several pages at once. As you work with templates more and more, you'll soon realize that it's actually quite hard to apply a template to a lot of entries at once. So here we have 10 bugs and we want to add them to our task database. And we see we actually have a specific, bug property for it. But if we now take all of these entries, right, and we move them all into task, we realize, well, nothing gets applied, not even the default template, right? So I would need to click into every single one and apply this template. Quite annoying. Luckily, there's a workaround, though it's quite hidden in Notion UI. So let's move all of these out there. And then what we need to do is we first actually need to turn them back into plain text because it doesn't work if it's already a page. So let's click on the 6 dots and say turn into text. Now we can highlight all 10 of them. And if we click now on these 6 dots and turn into, we see that we now get this page in option. And here in this page in, we can now search for the name of the template. Very important, right? Task is actually the database, but we don't want to choose that. We want to search for the name of the template, and this template is called bug. So we search for bug and then we see, we have this, we have this bug template here in our task database. And if I click here, it will now turn all of these into bug templates. You see, I have my 10 entries in here now. The template has been applied and they actually remain here as links, right? So they're just linked instances, so we can remove them without any issue, right? If we don't want them here, right, it won't delete the actual entries, but it's the quickest way to apply a template to dozens of pages at once. Number 47, reapply a template to an old entry. This also happens all the time. You edit an entry to a database, but it has the wrong template. That might either be because you had a default set, right? So here, as you remember, we have the regular task set. So if we, add, another bug number 11, oh no, it has the auto task template applied, and we would rather have the bug template. Or it might be that you created a new template for tasks, right? You might have updated it, and updating a template doesn't retroactively apply it to your old entries. So what can you do? Well, very easily, you can simply open your page where you have that entry, and then if we wait for it to load, or we take another example where it has already loaded it, right? And what we can simply do is we can select everything in the page body. And to do so, we simply press Command A twice. Command A once, just selects the line. Command A twice selects everything in the page body. And now we cut that out, right? So press Command X to remove it. And now you see we get back to our template selection. So now we can indicate that this is actually a bug, right? It will automatically apply everything. It will change the icon, change all the other properties that we want to set, and will load in this new property. And then we can simply paste in the content that we had previously, right, if it was relevant. So to sum up, simply remove everything from the body of a page, and then you can reselect a template and reapply it. Number 48, use sync blocks to mass update templates. This is pretty much the only way of how you can retroactively change pages that already have a certain layout. So let's say we went ahead, right, and we created a new template for like a new standard page in our workspace. And then we have a few elements there, and maybe at the very top, right, we want in a little callout, we want some nav bar to quickly move around our workspace. Now, the problem, of course, is that if we, let's set this quickly as default, and then let's create a new page to test this, right? This is our test page. We open it up, and we have our navbar in there, all good. Now, the problem is, if we now go in here and update this and say for the template, actually in my navbar I have one element and then I have another element, right? So let's use the add command from earlier, right? And we want to have home here that we link to. Do we have a home here? No, let's link our backend. That's a good one. So we always can access our databases quickly. We go now back to the page that we previously created and we see, oh, no, the navbar doesn't have it, right? It doesn't get applied. So we would need to delete everything. That's of course annoying. Now, what we can do instead is we can create a synced block. Synced blocks are super useful in Notion for a bunch of things because they, well, keep your content in sync. To do so, type /synced. And now what we can do is we can just add something here. For example, we can just have some text. And then what we can do is we can click on copy and sync. And wherever I paste this now, can be anywhere else in my workspace, I get this other red block and everything in here will stay in sync, right? If I add something here, it gets added here. If I add something there, it gets added there as well. So great way to keep this in sync. And now we can utilize this feature together with templates to create auto-updating templates. To do so, let's move our callout in here, right? So let's type /callout. Let's call this navbar. Let's do this, and let's have again, our backend in here. And now what we can do is we can copy and sync, and we can go to our template and say, okay, let's edit this template and replace our default navbar with this synced block. If we now quickly apply this here once, what we'll see is that we can now carry over any changes to all the pages. So if I now update this, with another thing, and we open up our page, we see we have now another thing here as well. So sync blocks is one of the best ways to make sure that certain elements stay in sync across all your templates, even if you change them later on. Number 49, build hundreds of dashboards quickly with self-referential filters. This is hands down my favorite feature in Notion, what made me initially fall in love with the tool. I still remember watching a video from Kehi where he talked about his 3 favorite words in Notion, self-referential filter. Now, that sounds complicated, but it's actually really easy. The use case for this is as follows. We already have our information organized in databases, right? So for example, projects and tasks. And then we've created relations between our different setups, right? To connect certain tasks to a project. So far, so good. What we now, of course, would like to see is if we click into a project, right, which tasks are associated with it. And we can, of course, do that right by clicking, like opening this and then seeing here the tasks. But that's not that great, right? Because we don't have barely any context on them. Like if we have a whole bunch of them, we can't filter for it. It's not really convenient. So what I always do is I always hide this property at here. And then I instead create a linked database view in the body of this page, right? So we say create linked view of database. We take the tasks, and this is actually called simple tasks, right? I have too many task databases in this demo workspace. And then what we want to do is we want to set here a filter where we say, okay, please only show me the tasks where the project is find a new apartment. And now I only have the tasks, right, that belong to this project. But of course, that's not very efficient because I would need to set it up for every single one, right? In particular, if we don't just have tasks, but let's imagine we have 3 other elements, right? So let's say we have tasks, meetings, and docs. It would be a mess having to set it up for every single project. So instead, what we do, we go and use a template. So let's set up a new template. Let's call this new project. And let's follow some best practices and add an icon, right? We want to make sure we always use our one standard icon for a project here. And in the body of the page, we can say, okay, let's give me an H2 actually. Let's call this tasks. And then here we go through the same steps, right? Create link view, pick simple tasks, pick our table view. That's perfect. We can hide the database title to make this look cleaner. We can give this an empty view name, right? And our checkmark from before. So using some other tips from earlier for a very clean look. And now what we can do, if we go to filter, add advanced filter, we can say where project contains, and at the very top, we will see the name of the template. The topmost element will always be the template that you're currently editing. So let's set that. And the cool thing about this is that this is now dynamic. So whenever we apply this template anywhere, it will automatically update. So here, finish 100 books, right? We haven't set anything up. I click on here and we'll automatically pull it in. There are no tasks associated with it, but we get our setup. And if I have the other thing, right, building the #1 Notion consultants in Europe, which is my goal for next year, we see the 2 tasks that are associated with it automatically show up here. This is amazing because, again, right, we can create now dozens of projects and we'll always pull in the associated elements without any additional work. And number 50, make your templates recurring. Let's say, for example, I have a journal. And in this journal, I've set up a simple template, my daily journal template, right? we have this here. We actually don't have a dynamic date yet, but we can just do this while we're at it, right? We can say today, date with duplicate, and we can even improve this further by saying, daily journal and then dash, and also use the add method, right? And also here put in, date when duplicate so that we have the date also in the title. Perfect. Now, instead of just having to click here every day, right, to create this template, I can automate this. And I can go in and do this by clicking on the 3 dots, and then on the 3 dots here, and now set to repeat. So I can say I would like to repeat this daily, weekly, right? For weekly, you can also pick the days of the week. So let's actually say I always want to, journal during the week, but not on weekends. So I will select all of these, say every week, and I want to create this always at 7, in the morning. I can click save. Now every week it will spawn a new, or every day during the week it will spawn a new entry of me that pops up here without me having to do anything. Number 51, create recurring tasks in Notion. Recurring tasks in Notion are finally possible, and I just want to quickly show you how to set them up in a very base version. But I have a tutorial linked below in the description that goes over all the different variations and more advanced tips that you can do. But basically, what you want to do is you want to have in your task database one additional property that indicates how often something should be repeated. In this case, I use just a number property and I just put it in days, but you could also have a select property, right, and have monthly, these sort of things. And again, if you have like any of these other versions, check out the link in the description. So what we want to do then is we want to go to the automations. Click here, and let's call this recurring tasks. Now, our trigger in this case will be whenever we set the status of any task to complete, and at the same time where we have a repeat set, right? Because we don't, so if this is bigger than 0, only then should this trigger, because otherwise we don't want to do this on all the tasks. If that's the case, then as an action, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we now update this page. And there are 2 versions, right? We can either just take the entry itself and put a due date to the future. That's what I'm going to show here. Or you could also create a new version of this task if you want a historic trait of it. But it's a little bit more involved, so check out the other tutorial for that. In this case, if you just want to, move the due date forward, what we say is now, please edit my property. Please edit the due date that we have here. And let's do this with a custom formula. What we can do now here is we can say, okay, please take the trigger page. And of that trigger page, please take the due date. And now do date add, right? Please add to our latest due date the repeat every value, right? We have the repeat, where do we go? We have date add, we should have our, we need to go get a trigger page first, trigger page, and then repeat every. And that is in days, right? So with these elements, taking the due date of the trigger page and then using the date add operator and pulling the repeat every also from the trigger page, we now just extend this by whatever we have in there. And we can click on save. And the second thing that should happen is we want to also edit the status, right? We want to set the status back to, not started, because we want to make sure we can both do it again. So in this case, right, we currently have check daily apartment listings. It is due December 17th. It is not started. We have repeat every one. So I will go in here. I will set it to done. And in a second, this should extend to December 18th, and it should be back to not started. And there we go, December 18th not started. We could also now, say repeat every 17th for whatever reason. Click on done. In a second, we'll again do the calculation, move it forward. And you have so many variations of this. Oops, I have set a filter here where it's like relative to the day this week. Let's, make it this month. Then it should prep up back up. Oh no, still not. So it's still further in the future with 17. So we have an issue there, but you get the gist, right? We will just extend the current due date with this formula and make sure that we can set our recurring tasks automatically without any input from us. Notion is releasing updates faster than ever, which can make it quite tough to keep track of everything. So if you see something in your workspace that you don't see covered anywhere else, then check out my website at matthiasfrank.de/Notion updates, where I keep a running log of everything that's new in Notion. That way, you'll never miss a beat. Number 52, create subtasks in Notion. Doing so is super simple. You just want to click on the 3 dots on your database, and you can do this on the main view or link view pretty much anywhere. Then you go to customize, and here you should see the sub-items option. You can also click on see all features if you don't have it, and then it should show. If you click on add and then on turn on sub-items, you see a few things happening. First, you have now this little toggle at the very front, and you can open it and you can add like a subtask 1 to this task now. Or you can, further open up your subtask and pretty much nest infinite numbers of subtasks here. You also can see that on the back end, this is done by Notion adding 2 new properties, parent item and sub item. And the very first thing I will do is, of course, in line with the other things, right? Update the icons. I hate the default icons. I think it's much better to have always something else for the quick visual indication of where something goes. But this is how it's basically indicated. So if I have, a subtask and I inspect it, I see that my parent item is set, which means, right, for example, if I, for setup profile, if I were to go in here and as a parent item define my setup daily email alerts. So let's actually do this on, on setup email alerts. One of the this might be a parent or child, whoever of the check daily email alerts. We see that it disappears and gets automatically sorted in there. So you can also sort of manually afterwards sort them in. You can further customize how it's shown by going back to simple tasks and then on sub items. And here you can switch between the nested tutorial view, the one where you only show the main tasks, the one where you show both in line and you get this like little gray indication if it's a subtask, and the one where you don't show anything of that as the disabled option, right? So here I just don't see any indication that this is a subtask or not. Now, bit careful, if you turn off sub items, you need to be careful what select. If you select the remove properties option, then it will actually delete these relations, right? And your data is gone. So you don't know any longer like what is associated with what. So a little bit careful if you turn them off after you've turned them on and filled out a ton of things. Because if you reactivate them afterwards, after deleting the properties, it will not automatically fill out again. Number 53, create dependencies in Notion. Similar process, we click on the three dots, customize, and then on dependencies. Now, we have a few options here. We can change how the shifting works. Basically, right, if you have dependencies between tasks or projects, and you want to maybe automatically adjust the due dates of them whenever they overlap. So this gives you the option, right, to say shift only when dates overlap. And you see the little animation here that tells you, okay, so if the task overlaps with the next one, we'll push that out. You can shift and maintain the time between items. So if you have, 3 days between it, we'll always drag them around in the same order. Or you can not shift them at all. In particular, if you work in a bigger team environment, I recommend starting with this one because you don't want to accidentally shift the due dates of all your team members around. That would be quite unfortunate. But if you choose one of the auto-shifting ones, so let's use this one, we might want to turn on avoid weekends or nothing ever starts on a weekend. And then we can turn on dependencies. Now, with dependencies, you see nothing changes directly in the UI, but we get again 2 new relation properties, block by and blocking. And again, same idea here, right? I just like to have like a little hand on the one and a little stop sign on the other one. And often I actually change the naming convention because block by and blocking can be a bit confusing. So personally, I find it easier as to update it. But of course, that depends on what language makes most sense to you. Idea is the same. You can now add them here. So if we say, okay, before we, for example, set up our daily email alerts, we need to set up our profile. So we can go in daily email ones and you can add in here, say now, okay, set up profile. That will be the one that's blocking it. Now, in this table view, there's not too much other information we get, right? We simply have now in here, that is an indication. Of course, if we open it, right, we have our properties that tells me, okay, before maybe we can do this, we need to check that this here is actually done. The real magic happens not on database view, but on the timeline view. So let's add that one to it. So let's click on plus. Let's say we want to add a timeline, and it will also be for the simple task that we're working on here with. And now what we see is that when we look at any of these entries, we have the option to drag these elements. So we currently don't have many due dates here, so we just need to adjust it a little bit so it's a little bit easier visually to see that. But in a second, we can then start assigning dependencies much easier. So how does it work? We have here this little yellow icon, and we can start dragging that to indicate any other element is, that we have this dependency between it. And the second I do this, you see that it actually gets pushed out. Because remember, we set up that the due dates get automatically shifted. So depending on how it's set up, right, you might want to change that setting before you now create all your dependencies. But still quite useful in forecast. Now I reschedule an element, oops, the other elements get pushed out. But since we only had it in one direction, right, it won't come back if I schedule it back. So sometimes you then have to do a little bit of extra work to make sure that things are still properly aligned. Number 54, autofill information using filters. This will make your Notion builds so much more efficient. So we have our task database again, and let's set actually a filter here. Let's say we only want to see entries here where the due date is today. So we switch it for due date and we say is today. Now we currently see that there's nothing in here. If I add an entry though now through this view, watch what happens to the due date, right? So if I have, like test task here, you see that the due date has been automatically set to today. Even more, if I now go in and say, okay, we want only things that are due today and that belong to a specific project, right? The project should contain the builder number 1 Notion consultancy one. Again, we have nothing here, but if I add a new entry, we see that it automatically gets both these elements filled. So general rule in Notion, whenever you set a filter on a database view and add a new entry through that filter, Notion will try to fill out the properties and fulfill that filter. That of course is sometimes not possible, right? If you had set up a filter where you say, the start date should be before today, right? Also, the start date. Do we have a created date on here? No, let's create an impossible filter, right? Let's have a created time, and let's say the start date. Oops, sorry, the start date for this is in the past. Then if we end something, we can of course not fulfill it, and it will simply default to a different behavior, right? So here, we say created time is before today. And now we see what happens if we now click in here. Instead of adding a line here, it opens it in the side because it sort of recognizes, well, I can't show you this entry here. The filter is not fulfilled. I cannot possibly fulfill it. Please, fill out whatever you want here, and then you can close it. But if you can fulfill the filters, right, if they are easy to fill out, then Notion will do that, which makes it much easier to build in dashboards, right, to easily add certain entries where you say, okay, I only want to add things for this project, or I only want to set things with this and that tag. Number 55, autofill information using database automations. Another really useful way to just cut down the number of manual clicks you have to do. So let's say, for example, whenever I assign a t-shirt size, right, to a specific project, that indicates I now started work on it. So I don't want to have to manually also now move this to next in line. In order to do so, let's go to create database automation. Let's say, like start task. And let's say we want to do this whenever we edit whenever in the size, right? When we have this to any option, then we want to change our current status to edit property, edit status to next in line. It's as simple as that. We click on create, and now that means whenever I move, like say this is actually the size S and this is the size M, right? We will move those two tasks fall into the in progress part so that I can start work on them. Now you have pretty much endless opportunities with this, right? You could also say, okay, whenever we have a certain status assigned, we want to change the responsible person. If I have a due date, right? Like pretty much anything that you have there where you say, okay, if something happens, assign certain properties, you can do it like that and then cut down on the manual work. But of course, you need to be on a paid Notion plan. Forgot to mention that previously, automations are only available on all the paid plans. If you're on a free plan, you can still use automations, but only if they are part of a template that you downloaded. Number 56, learn about this automation limitation. That makes sense because Notion wants to avoid infinite loops. So for example, if you were to set up like an automation, right, that says, okay, whenever a page is added to this database, please add a page to this database. And that in theory, right, would create an infinite loop, but of course that doesn't happen, right? So if we create this and we just go in here and we create, like a new entry, we'll see in a second, it will create another entry, but then this second entry that has been added by the automation won't trigger the whole run again. There we go, there's our new entry, but after that it stops. Now, while this is useful to avoid infinite loops, it also means that there are a lot of use cases where you can't use the trigger in Notion yet that you would want to, right? So for example, if you have a template set as recurring, right, and you say, okay, every day I want to have something happen, and then once this is created, I want to have a Notion automation run and do some things, that's not possible. It won't be able to notice the thing that has been added. It's different if you use a third-party automation, right? So if you use make.com or Relay or Zapier or so to add a new page to Notion, that will trigger your internal Notion automations. But anything within Notion, right? So the automations here or the recurring things there won't be able to do it. Number 57, autofill information using buttons. Another tip for building better dashboards, make sure that when you add your buttons, they help you pre-fill information. So for example, we have our task database here, and we can set up a button, of course, to add a task to it. And we can have it very simple, right? We can just say new task. And all I can do is when the button is clicked, please add a page to my simple task database, right? Simple task as a new task, where you can just call this new task, and then we can be done with it. Now, if I just click this, it will just add a new entry. So far, so good. But why stop there, right? You can then say, okay, if I have certain things that I have to add all the time, you can, preload them into your button. So let's duplicate this. Let's call this, new task for today. And now we can expand this and we can say edit another property. We want to also set the due date to date triggered. Now we can click on that. And now if we do this, we see that we get a new task with the current due date. And of course, we can expand this as much as you want, right? So if you often need to create like important tasks, right? We could, do something like, new important task, and then go in here and say, instead of the due date, right, we want to actually edit the tag, and we want to always assign the important tag. Whatever it is, you can use buttons to make sure that your data entry is much easier and you don't have to do everything manual. Now, top tip, when you create these buttons to add entries, I would always add a second step. And as a second step, say, please open the page that we just added. So open the thing from the previous step and open it in SidePeek, that's my preferred mode, so that you can edit it easily, right? You don't have to search for it in the list, you get immediate feedback that something happened. Otherwise, this is a linked view. If by any accident, you delete it on the page or you build it for a team member and they don't know that, there is actually something happens, they can click on this, for ages and create a ton of tasks, never see it. Not so great in terms of UI feedback. So you always want to have this second step there as well. Number 58, visualize your data using charts. Notion charts are absolutely amazing to help you visualize all the data in your workspace, whether it's how you spend your time, how many tasks you have per employee, whether you want to track your reading list, create any visualization for trends over time. For example, this is like a pain diary, right? Or a burn down chart for big dashboards or small ones. It's an absolutely amazing feature. Now I have a full tutorial link in the description. I will go over every single chart type where you can build a Notion, and also a few workarounds if you don't have the Notion charts, because they are only available on the paid plans. If you want free charts, there's a workaround for that as well in the description, but highly recommend that you look at your most used things and see, okay, how can I visualize them to get more information quickly. Number 59, learn dashboarding 101. We already talked about the fact that you want to use a few mega databases to organize your Notion workspace, and you want to put them away in a backend so that they're all stored in one place. We also mentioned that usually you actually would not go into this backend to interact with that data and instead build dashboards. So let's talk about dashboards and how to utilize them in Notion. A dashboard to me is any page in Notion that contains linked views to a database, whether that's just one simple linked view, right, to do a very specific task, or whether it's a mega dashboard, right, that collects views from pretty much all the databases in your system. Either of them is a dashboard. And we'll talk about the dashboarding 101 in a second. But first, I want to put out one thing here, and that is that there's not really a right or wrong between, building like lots of dedicated dashboards for a specific task versus building mega dashboards. It comes a bit down to your personal preference. I think particularly in a team environment, there's a lot to be said for having, one specific page for one specific workflow, because it just makes it easier for other people to understand it and it cuts down a little bit on noise. But mega dashboards can be quite cool, right, if you can do everything in your system on one page. And it's a spectrum, right? Maybe your pages lie somewhere in between here, right, where you say, okay, I have like a few things on that, but then I have like 2 or 3 major dashboards. Doesn't really matter how you organize it. Think about the way you want to work with Notion and what you need to see in order to fulfill a specific task. And you also don't have to overthink the way your Notion dashboards look like. Here are basically the 2 core archetypes, right, for Notion dashboards that you will see everywhere. And if you look around on Reddit or in the Notion template gallery, you'll see this type of layout all the time. This is the first one where you have sort of like a nav bar at the very top. You have then maybe a 2-column or several column structure where, for example, you could have like some key information in one side and then some quick actions in another. And then you have your core views down below to take some action. Or another version is where you have like this 2 split on your page, right? Where on the left hand you have a smaller column where you have all your actions and navigation, and then you have this sort of main area with all the structure. So let's see how we could quickly use this to build a dashboard for a specific use case. And for the first example, why don't we take a marketing team that wants to organize all their marketing work. So at the very top in the nav bar, you might want to have like the links to the pages that you need to jump to quickly or to your core pages, right? So let's type @ and let's get Acme home to go back to our main homepage. And we could also maybe want to go to our marketing main page in Acme, right? So just we can quickly jump back from these pages. And maybe we also want to have a way to link to our core database, right? So let's add that one here as well. I think it should be the content pipeline. Yes, perfect. This is a demo workspace, so there are a lot of databases in here. Sometimes we'll pick the wrong ones, but yeah, this is a good start, right, for us to help quickly get back to our other things. Now, in terms of key info, we have a few options here, right? We could, write a little about section here about this page, like explaining how it's supposed to be used, link out to other key resources, or in particular, if it's a team environment, we want to give some quick insights. I love adding charts here. So let's start by that. Let's type /chart. And in this case, why don't we take maybe a vertical bar chart to visualize just the workload of the marketing team. So we're going to take this, we're going to link to a database, and let's pick tasks in the Argument Demo workspace. Perfect. And here we see now what would we want to show? We want to show this actually by the person who is responsible for these tasks. And the task count is great. And now let's just set a filter. We want to make sure that we set an advanced filter to only show tasks that are open, right? So we kind of want to see our workload. So where the status is to do or in progress. Perfect. Now, if I have like a team or like a company with several teams, I would want to add like another filter here to only show the workload for our specific team, right? But just for this little demo, we can leave it like this. And then just to make it take up less space, Let's go to more style options and set this to small. So now we just have this little, like workload overview here at the top. And then we can continue with our quick actions. Again, so whenever we build this out, right, we want to think about what happens when someone goes on this dashboard, right? What are the actions that we need to take? How can we speed them up? We might want to be able to add a new task for our marketing team and then add new content ideas. And the easiest way to do this with buttons. So let's add a new button. And let's call this new marketing task. Let's click on and give this a nice emoji. Let's give this a plus icon. Or actually, since it's a task, even better, let's use our standard icon that we use everywhere for tasks. And we say when this button is clicked, let's add a page to our Acme tasks database in the Acme demo workspace. We add an empty one, but otherwise we could pick a specific template if we wanted to. We can just like leave the name empty. We want to edit maybe the responsible and say whoever clicks this button should be the responsible person. And in terms of the anything else, right, design request sizing, I think that's all fine. We can leave that. Again, right, if we had now several teams in here, we would also add the team to make sure that it's automatically tagged to the marketing team. But in this demo workspace, we don't have that set up. So we leave it like this. And then the second thing that I always, as I mentioned already before, I might want to do, we want to always make sure that we open this page then inside Peak so that the user just gets a little bit of a feedback once they've added it. Perfect. I quickly also added 2 more buttons for a new YouTube video, new LinkedIn post. Setup is exactly the same. Right, we want to add something to our content pipeline, and now we can specify a specific template. So in this case, we say we want to use the YouTube template, right, for YouTube video and LinkedIn for LinkedIn post. And we could do this, of course, for all our different things. Also, if we had like several types of meetings, right, we could add that. Maybe we add like a little 2-column layout actually in here and have buttons stacked here and here. And just so that, whenever you go on this marketing dashboard, you can quickly take all the actions that you typically would need to. So let's continue and let's build our views. And since this is for the marketing team, let's say we are adding 2 views here. We add one for our content pipeline, and we want to add another one down below for our task. I think it's actually an H3. So we want to add one for our marketing tasks. All right. And remember, since we have already these views set up on our core database, we can now simply type /create link view of database, and we can pull in from the content pipeline. We see these are our 2 pre-built options. So I'm going to pull in the board view that we already created. Now I just need to give it an empty view name, right? The Kanban can stay. And I will hide the database title. And now we have this clean looking Kanban board here on our dashboard. I'm pretty zoomed in, right? So if I were to zoom out, it's like a little bit easier to work with this, but just for the point of the demonstration, let's leave it like this. And then same idea, right? For marketing tasks, we would then again type /create link view of database, pull in tasks and say, let's actually only pull in the open tasks, right? If we want to have it as a list, or if we also want the Kanban board, let's pull in the board. Let's do 2 boards. That's a nice look. And maybe the marketing team wants to always work with this process. So in this case, I would probably then just swap this out here for this and then actually for the content as well, just so we have the same visual identity everywhere, right? This is particularly useful if you're building for team settings, just to make sure that everyone at a glance can spot what this is about. Perfect. So this is already a pretty decent looking dashboard, and you see the power of using this over you working on the main database views, because you can add so much context to it, right? You're not limited to just pulling in a database view. You can have several database views next to each other, right? We could have a 2-column layout and show both of them side by side. We could add like additional context here. For example, if we want to explain to our team, explain how to use this or what to keep in mind, we can then highlight this, right, and use some other best practices from styling pages. For example, you making this light gray, right, so that it doesn't pop so much. And with that, give people a lot more flexibility and power in the way they use it. They don't have to switch between databases, they don't have to switch between views. Whatever the specific task and workflow is, all can be done on this one dashboard. And just to complement this with another layout version for our dashboard, this time personal one, right? It's a little bit of a second brain inspired one. We have on the side our navbar. Of course, it's just a demo one, right? So nothing is really linked, but you can just like hyperlink over anything for the Notion page, and it actually will jump to that. Or of course, with the add command, right, reference specific elements if you want to do that. We then have, our 3 buttons to capture a new idea, a new book, or a new blog post. Then we have 2 minimalist views, right? Of one hand of our idea database and then of our book database side by side. Number 60, use Notion forms to collect input. So many cool use cases for Notion forms. Here's one example where we use a Notion form, right, to quickly capture a design request for an internal design team, where we collect, okay, what is it that we need? What fund does it relate to? What is the, the detailed description, and when do they need it? And then again, can use the dashboarding principles, right? We just learned to actually not just have this form in isolation, but for example, when we show people this form, show also, okay, what is our workload looking like, right? So they can sort of like expect, okay, not looking very likely, right, that anything gets done in this week, but maybe afterwards things are looking a bit better. And then they can also see their requests on the same page to keep track of things that are going on, right? When they actually requested for and when they can expect the delivery. Notion forms are not just though for internal collaboration. You can also use them to collect information with people from outside of your workspace. For example, here I wanted to collect information for the Notion community. I run the local community in Berlin and I wanted to see what can we do in 2025 to make it better. Of course, I don't want everyone to see all the responses, particularly like sensitive data like email, right, that we want to use to like follow up potentially on feedback. And luckily, with the new Notion forms, that's possible. All you need to do is create your form and then click on Share Form in the top right corner. And here you can change the who can fill out to anyone on the web with a link. Now everyone can access this form, but they won't have access to the underlying data and all the other answers. Number 61, create an easy progress bar using rollups. Remember our projects from earlier? Let's actually make sure we see how many of these tasks we have currently finished. Because in this view, right, we currently just see all the tasks connected to it, and we would need to open it up and look at the dashboard, right, to see that, okay, here we have currently nothing completed, and then finally new part, we also have nothing completed. Let's actually set one thing here to done so that we can at least track some progress. Perfect. Now, how do we do this? Well, we can simply click on plus, and then we can look for a rollup. And a rollup allows us to pull information from a relation. Right? So in order to use a rollup, you always need to have a relation first, which we have here, 2 tasks. So the first step is to actually pick this relation. So in case we had several, right, we could choose from them, but in this case, we want to show something from tasks. The next is then the question, okay, from our tasks, what is it that we care about? And that's what we add here to the property. You see by default, it just shows me the exact same thing as a relation. But I could ask it to, for example, oh, please show me the status, right? And now I see the individual status elements for these tasks. Already better, right? Because I can see now at a glance, okay, 1 out of 3 is done here. But in particular, if I have a lot of tasks, that's still not that useful. So we can go one step further, and under calculation, we can now say, instead of showing me the original, I would like you to either count, right, something, or in this case, I want to see actually the percent. I want to see the percent per group, right? I want to see how far are you done with the individual things, or how many of these things are completed. And now we see at a glance, then we have 33% completed here and 0 here, right? We can quickly rename this also to progress rollup, just so we know what this property is about. And then if we want to see more than a number and also a nice progress bar, we can click on it and say edit property. And whenever we have a result as a number, we have the option here to choose that instead of just seeing a number, we want to see a nice little bar or a ring, right? And for that, we can then also like show which color we want. So let's actually pick, like pink maybe as the color. Perfect. So now we have a simple, easy progress bar that auto updates, right? The second we click on any of these tasks, maybe through our dashboard, and say that we've actually completed it. We can even combine this, right, with a layout builder, customized layout that we've seen before, and say, okay, let's take all of these, put them all in the sidebar, and then let's add like the progress here as a big element that I want to see here in the middle of it. Perfect. Much nicer look and very quick to set up. Number 62. Create an advanced progress bar using formulas. Now the result of this is actually fairly similar to our progress bar for rollups, but it's still worth to know how it works, because that way you can then further expand this formula. For example, you could say only count certain tasks, right? Make it more granular. So let's take a look at the basic principles. I've already added a formula property, right? Very straightforward. And then we can click in here to edit this formula. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to count how many tasks we actually have in total. So in order to do so, let's type tasks, and then we can type dot, and then length. And this will count the length of this array, right? And that means here we get back 3 elements, and here we get back 2 elements. Perfect. So now we know how many tasks we have. Now, in order to figure out how many of these tasks are actually completed, we need to adapt it, sorry. So before we count the length of it, we need to check how many of these, we want to filter it to only show the ones that are completed. So we type dot filter, and now we can say current, which will go over every single element of that relation. And I say we only want to show this if, and now you see after I type current dot, we get all the properties from our task database. And I will say, yeah, just give me the ones where the status equals done. And now if I click save, right, I just see that I have now this relation where I have only my completed tasks. You could, of course, use the opposite, right? You could say, show me only the ones that are not done. And that way you can actually have a relation view that only shows you your open tasks. Also quite useful in a lot of situations. But in our case, we want to have the completed tasks, because then, of course, we can then take the number of completed tasks, right? So dot length divided by the number of tasks overall, and we get our percent for how many things are completed. So we can then go in, right, say edit property, please show it to me as a bar, and this is actually percent, and then we get pretty much the same result, with one exception. As you can see, it doesn't give me a nicely rounded number. So we need to adapt the formula with one last step, and that's also a good practice to learn how to round numbers in Notion. In order to do so, we're gonna go in and add brackets around this, and then we can add our rounding operators below. In Notion, you round using the .round command, and this will round it to the nearest full number, which, as you can see, is a problem with percent, because that means it's either 0 or 1. Not ideal. So in order to round with percent, we actually need to first say .multiply times 100, and then after what we rounded, we can then divide it by 100, and that way we get an even percent number. If we want it with one part after the comma, we do it with 1,000. If we want to have 2, 10,000, and so on and so on. Really useful to just know the sequence of operators right whenever you need to round anything in Notion. And there we have it. We basically recreated the same result, right, that we have here, just with Notion formulas, which accidentally also serves as a little crash course in Notion formulas. There's another video that I have coming out very soon, which will go over everything that you need to know in order to make the most out of Notion formulas and Notion automations. So keep an eye out for that. I will link it down below in the description once it's ready. 63. Add a status emoji using database automations. If you like visual indicators or emojis, then this one is for you. So let's say we have our task database here, and besides the status property, we also actually want to make sure that we have a little icon in the front of our tasks in order to help us just quickly scan it right when we look through it to see what is done and what isn't. And we can do that with database automations. So in order to do so, let's go in here and let's say create first the first part of the automation, which will set the initial emoji, and we'll have another automation that will update it whenever the status changes. So let's call this set initial emoji. And our trigger will be that a new page is added to this database. And when we do that, what we want to do is we want to edit the actual name of the task database. And we want to update it with the formula. So the formula will be that we want to get from the trigger page the task name, right? Because we want to keep the same name, but then we want to add an emoji in front. So in order to do so, we click in the front and we type now 2 quotation marks and plus. And whatever will be within those 2 quotation marks will be added in front of it. So, for example, if we want to say, okay, whenever we do that, let's add, for example, a little gray circle, right? That might be our best way to indicate it. This has still to be done. So, which one do we get here? Let's actually let's get this this one here, and then a space in order to make sure that it's not directly on the task. Then we can click save and save here, and this is all we need to do. So we can create. And then we can drag all our tasks in here, and we can wait for a second, and we'll see that we'll update all the names with that little emoji in the front of it. And here we go, all our tasks with a little emoji in front. Now let's make sure that whenever we change the status, we want to change that color. So for that, we will set up a second automation, and this will be, set in progress emoji. And here the trigger will be that the status has been changed to in progress. When this happens, we now need to update the name. So again, we go to edit property, we want to update the task name, and again, we want to use a formula. In this case, what we need to do is we need to get the trigger page, and we need to get, again, the name from it. And then we need to remove, actually, the old emoji, right? And in order to do that, we can use the substring operator. Substring will give us part of our main string, right? By simply getting, telling it, okay, from where do we actually start, right? What's the letter from which we should start? And we know that our emoji takes up 1 space, and then we have a normal space, so we'll just put in 2. And this, if we just test it, right, should give us then the value of the task without that emoji. So let's just take this in, quickly test it, and see whether if we set this to in progress, it actually removes that one from the front. And there we go, worked like a charm. Perfect. So you know the drill. We can then adjust this now, this for the set in progress emoji, right? And update it to not just remove the front part, but then again, add the new emoji in front of it. So again, write our 2 quotation marks and plus. And in this case, let's use the green one, right, to indicate that we're currently working on this. And then just to complete the whole thing, we can then duplicate this automation. And for the other one, say, okay, set the set completion emoji. And now that I think about it, the green one should probably be on this one. So, oops, sorry, we need to update this here to whenever we set this to done. Perfect. And then for the other one, for the in progress one, let's use instead of of green, let's use maybe the yellow one, just because we have it here in our quick selection, save. And now if we update any task to a different progress, right? Let's say this is in progress, this here is done, this here is in progress, and this one is also done. We will see that automatically updates our little status indication in the front. Now, of course, this, like with all these automations in Notion, you need to be a bit careful, particularly if you use it in a team environment, because sometimes they can work in a way where you don't expect them, right? So for example, right, remember here, this one task that we created where it didn't get that initial emoji or where we removed it afterwards? Well, see what happens if I set this now to done. It will actually remove the S and the C because, right, we tell it to always cut off these first two letters. So we end up with this not quite complete task. So that's, of course, like one thing to keep in mind, right, when you build these things. They're like a fun little trick and often quite useful, but you need to be careful about the situation in which you deploy them. Number 64, create pivot tables. Now I need to preface this tip with a little disclaimer, and that is that in Notion, we don't have pivot tables per se, because we have databases, not spreadsheets. Most of the time, the difference doesn't matter too much unless you're into computer science, because it kind of looks a little bit like a spreadsheet, but it's very important that it's not. One of the key differences is, right, that in a spreadsheet, you can reference pretty much any cell anywhere, whereas in a database, everything is tied to a specific row. That's why when we create a formula, right, in a Notion database, we can't just reference another row as a property. We can only do our calculations on one row. And one other side effect of this is that there's no easy way, right, to create a pivot table, but we can sort of cheat our way into that by using charts. So in order to do that, let's say we look at our market sales, right? We want to see, okay, how many do we actually sell per country? To do so, we would use probably a pivot table if we had a spreadsheet, but here we can simply create a chart. So we say, please create link view of database. Let's take our market sales, new table view, chart, and then edit chart. For these, like, fake pivot tables, quote unquote, I like the horizontal bar chart. I like to show the country. We have already that, and then we want to show the count. Then we can say, please sort from high to low, and we can see at a glance, okay, we sell most of it to the United States, followed by Germany and the United Kingdom. And of course, also go in a bit more and say, actually, instead of just the number of products that we sell, I would rather see the sum, right? I want to see our revenue per country. We need to then reset our sort, again, high to low, still the same picture, right? United States followed by Germany. And then, even if it's not a pivot table, we can break it down a little bit more, right? And say, for example, okay, I would like to also know how the individual products are, stack up here. So we could go to the group option and say, please group this by product name. And now I see that in Italy, we only sell the mini espresso mug, whereas in France, it's the classic Notion mug and espresso, where in the US, it's pretty much all products. We can, of course, use this also for personal use cases. So here we have a journal, right? And we record our mood level and hours of sleep. And we might want to correlate this and see, okay, how does it, impact my mood, how much I sleep. In order to do this, I would recommend to, before we start visualizing this, to actually break the hours of sleep down into more categories, because it's a lot of different values and then it can be quite hard to see. So let's use a quick helper formula to create some sleep brackets. And the formula for this one can be fairly straightforward. This is like an ifs statement, right, which allows us to check for several conditions in a row. First, we check whether we slept 8 or more hours, then we want to fill 8 plus. If we slept more than 7, we want to fill 7 to 8, and if otherwise, we will fill below 7. So with just this very simple formula, right, we've broken it down into these 3 categories, and now we can create our chart on the other side. Let's go here for journal, new table view, chart view, and then let's edit this chart. We have currently our sleep quality or like our mood at the bottom, but instead I would actually rather see my different sleep brackets. And then I would like to show the count of like how often it has happened, right? So how often have I slept 7 to 8 hours? How often have I slept more? We can omit 0 values. And now we just get our overall value expression. We have actually the sorting is a bit off because it does it alphabetically. So let's go in here and say we want to sort this manually. We want to have below 7 in the front, then 7 to 8, and then 8 plus. Now, in order to correlate this right with our mood levels, we can then say, please group this by those mood levels. And then we can see at a glance, okay, when we sleep less than 7 hours, right, we always feel poor or average. We feel good or very good with 7 to 8 hours, and we feel excellent with more than 8 hours. Well, kind of an expected result, but of course you get the gist. If you have other data, you could use the same approach to visualize and correlate that in a chart. Moving on to a personal favorite of mine, efficiency hacks. Once you master these tips, you'll be using Notion twice as fast. We kick it off with number 65, the slash command. This is by far the most important shortcut in Notion, the slash command. You've seen it a few times already in this video, right? You simply type slash in a new line, and then you have the option to add pretty much any block to Notion. The second you start typing, you will filter down this list, but you can also just, go through it and actually have a look at all the different things that you could add. But we can, for example, just say, right, call to add our column options. We can add 2 or 3. If you want to do that, we could do an H for like a different H heading option, or our friend, the caller. Pretty much anything can be added like this. And you can even modify things, right? So let's say I've added like, some text blocks. So, this is important. And I realize now that this actually should be a callout. Well, I can simply type now /turn into, and now you see I get the options to just transform this. And again, I just pick this actually an H3. And this is much faster, right, than going in somewhere, clicking on either the plus, right, to create a new block, or then when you have something already, clicking on the 6 dots, and then having to say turn into in order to modify the entry. 66, get a new tab. In the Notion app, you can simply press Command T to open a new tab. 67, change the default behavior of new tabs. What happens when you open a new tab in the Notion app can be changed by going to your settings. And then here under My Settings, you see this option for New Tab Search. Now, if you turn this on, that means that whenever you press Command T, it actually launches Notion Search, which allows you to, specify the page that you want to open. But if you don't want to have to do this every single time, you can turn it off. And then as you can see in the tooltip here, what will then instead follow is your default page settings. Now remember, default page, that's the one that you can, among other things, change in Notion Home, where you go at the very top, right, and say, okay, the default page should be either my top page in the sidebar, my last visited page, or home. So in this case, in this test workspace, right, my top page is actually this 117 Notion tips list, which means whenever I type Command Tab, I just get this list of all the tips that we're going over in this video. 68, how to quickly tab through tabs. One last tab tip. If you have several tabs open, you can press Control Tab to tab through your different tabs open in Notion, which also involves the pinned tabs from earlier. 69, create a new Notion window. If you press Command N in Notion, you open a new page, which is actually often not what you want to do, so I don't recommend this shortcut, because it just drops it in your private pages. But if you press Command Shift N, that is actually useful because it allows you to create a whole new Notion window, right, with a new set of tabs. And yeah, just sometimes useful to have 2 different windows open. Number 70, get a link for a page. You can quickly grab the link to a page by pressing Command L. And then you see you get this little tooltip, link copied to clipboard. You can then paste it anywhere else in your Notion workspace, right, and have it mentioned. So that's another way, other than the add command that we talked about earlier, to link to your pages. It's also great to share it with people externally, right, or if you need to send someone on Slack the page that you're currently looking at. Alternatively, you can always click on the 3 dots, right, and say here, copy link, but that just takes far too long. 71 will improve your navigation. One of the quickest ways to navigate Notion is actually not to click your way, through your sidebar or through your pages, but to use search. Whenever you press either Command P or Command K, you open Notion Search. And by default, it will show you the last pages that you visited, which is also just useful to jump back to something rather than having to click all your way back. But you can also then just type for whatever you're looking for, right? So if you want to go back to our 170 tips, you can just very quickly navigate there rather than having to go in our sidebar and locate that page. 72 helps you open Notion from anywhere. This requires you to have the Notion desktop app installed, so another reason why you want it. If you are anywhere on your desktop, right, you can simply press Command Shift K and it will open Notion's global search. Doesn't matter whether you have Notion open or any other tool, right? Super easy to find what you're looking for and then jump right to the correct page. Command Shift K. Number 73 makes formatting easier. Remember our pretty Notion page and that we picked one color? Well, rather than having to click on every single heading and then saying, okay, I want this heading and I want it in yellow, there's actually a shortcut that makes it much easier. If you simply highlight something and press Command Shift H, you will apply the last formatting that you had, right? And this applies both for the font color, but also for the background color, right? So if we actually, used the last thing that we used was here, like let's say a brown background. Again, if we highlight this, right, and press Command H, we get that highlight here. Super useful, particularly if you read very long texts, right? And you want to review them in Notion, because then you can simply, highlight all the relevant sequences with just the click of a shortcut. With number 74, you can flip really quickly through database entries. When you're in a bigger database and you quickly want to flip through all your entries, you see that if you hover over the top here, there's actually this little arrow that allows you to go down or to go up to just flip through them rather than having to click. And of course, there's a shortcut to go with it. As you can see, if you press Control Shift J or Control Shift K, you can go navigate up and down in your database through the entries very quickly. Super useful with your side view here and dashboards to look through. Number 75 is to open all the toggles on a page. I love using toggles to organize my pages, but of course it means sometimes you need to click through all of them to quickly open them, which can be a bit annoying. So instead what you can do is you can press Command, Option and T to quickly open and close all the toggles on your page. The same actually also happens if you just highlight the toggles that you want to open, and if you then open one, you will actually open all of them. Number 76, how to get AI or not. If you are in a new line and press space, then you see that you launch Notion AI, right? So you can directly ask it. But sometimes that's a little bit annoying and you actually just want to have a space at the beginning of a line. So if you hold down Shift and press space, you can have as many, empty spaces at the beginning of a line without ever running into the Notion AI launcher. Number 77 is your shortcut for AI Anywhere. If you want more AI power, you can also always press Command J to launch the Notion AI context window. You can also highlight the text, right, and do it then. Or just like with the global shortcut for search, if you press Command Shift J anywhere in your Notion system, anywhere on your laptop while you have the desktop app installed, you will also launch a global Notion AI window. Number 78, set up an iPhone shortcut for quick capture. You don't even need to use a separate app for this. On your iPhone, you can run a shortcut that automatically adds a page to Notion based on your inputs. Full tutorial for this in the description. Number 79, mass update icons in a database. If you have a ton of entries in a database and you want to update the icons on all of them at once, well, don't worry, you don't have to click into them individually. You can simply select them all by, for example, selecting the few ones that you want, right, individually, or you can, at the very top right, just click on this one, then you select all entries in here. And now if you right-click, you see here the Edit Icon option. So now we can simply go in and write, we want just a double check mark, and now everything here has a check mark at once. Number 80, mass update properties. And we can use a similar method to mass update properties. So again, right, if I select any number of properties in here, you will see one thing happen. And that is that I get this like little floating bar here at the top, which shows me properties that I can with just one click then edit, right? So I could say actually the status for these two should be in progress. And then it edits them for all of these. Now, this doesn't show you all properties. It's actually influenced by a number of properties that you show in the view, right? So if you hide all the properties except for, tags, then you can kind of enforce that the bar will show you tags. But still, you might have a lot of other properties, and just changing the view for this might be a bit annoying. So what you can also always do, simply select everything, right-click, and then under Edit Property, you get access to all the properties on this element. So, right, you could say, okay, let's set the status for all of these to done. Even though we don't see the property here, it will edit them all at once. 81, use formulas to name join tables. Join tables in Notion are really useful concepts that come in handy whenever you have several databases, and now you need to record something about what happens when both of them, happen together. So let me give you an example. Let's say we run an agency, and we have creators and we have campaigns. And now we need to track how individual creators perform for different campaigns. In order to do so, we need to create a new database, right? One which has a relation to both our campaign and to our creator. So we can then record, okay, Sarah Smith got on the summer collection this amount of impressions with that CPC. In order to do so, previously, it was a bit annoying in Notion because, as you know, the main property of our database, right, this main field has to be a text field. We can't change the type. We can't say, give me a formula here, right, where I can say, okay, just combine campaign and creator. No, I have to go in and I would need to say, okay, this is Sarah for the summer launch, right? Quite annoying. But luckily, there's a better way to do this now, and it works with database automations. So let's click on here and create it. And let's say, let's call this set name. And for the trigger, we can simply use whenever the creator is edited. Now, ideally, we would have a more granular trigger where we say, okay, when creator and campaign is set, right, for the first time. But in this case, we can just, remember in our workflow that we fill creator afterwards, and that works just as fine. In terms of the action, what we want to do is we want to, whenever that happens, edit the property, and we want to edit the name, right, which is currently called creator ID. We should rename this properly. And we want to set it as a formula. And what I want to do is, please give me, from my trigger page, give me the campaign. And then since it's an array, right, we need to get to the first element. We'll anyway only link one campaign here always, so that's fine. And of that element, please give me the campaign name. And then I want to combine this with, and I want to first put like a space in between, right? We want to maybe even put a space with a dash in between. And after that, I want to get from the trigger page the creator, and then not creator ID, the creator, the first element, and then here as well the actual name of the person. Perfect. So now we can save this and we can create this automation. And now if we go in here, right, and say, okay, this was the, oops, I should have had like some specifics in there rather than the actual ID. So if we have the cam 002 and the creator is C003, let's see who that is. Let's just add a few combinations here. We can see that on the side in a moment, we will get these updates. So this was tag launch for Emma Davis. Perfect. And what is the next one? It was the summer collection with Tom Wilson. Perfect. So you get the idea. Really useful to quickly name your entries. Number 82 is a little hack to get search in Notion database automations. Notion database automations are now much more powerful, but they're still lacking a crucial feature, and that is search. We cannot dynamically pass any data in and then find corresponding values in another database. So, for example, remember our sleep journal from earlier? How cool would it be if we could connect our journal automatically to another database in which we store all the different weekdays? And then on these weekdays, we could, for example, look at all our Mondays right across the year and see whether we spot any patterns, or we could define certain themes for the day, right? We could say, okay, on Mondays, what we want to focus on is X, Y, Z. We want to reach out to these people, or like whatever, meta categories you have on here could be automatically pulled into your everyday values. Shout out to Ben Borowski, by the way. He has a really cool setup for this. Now, in order to do this in Notion, what we would intuitively do is we want to go to an automation. We say, oh, we want to search, right? I want to find a corresponding value. But the problem is that if I go here, right, I don't see any search or find step. And if I go for like edit pages in, where I can select another database, for example, my weekdays, we see that here, out of all the places, I can't pull in data dynamically, right? I can't dynamically reference values from the trigger, which means we can't really build this. But luckily, there is a workaround. And this workaround involves a specific setup for our templates. So let's have a look. We need on our new entry, right, on the database template that we have on here, we need to have that set up to connect to all the entries in the other database. And there you see already that this, of course, has a limited use case, all right? It needs to be another database where you have a limited number of entries, right, that mostly stays the same. Weekdays, months, years, right? That all works great. Clients, if you have a small number of clients and they don't change a lot, also works. But if you have, for example, thousands of tasks elsewhere, right, and they update all the time, then this workaround won't really do the trick. But so in this case, right, it works. So let's see how we do it. It's a bit more involved, but stay with me. So let's build this by clicking on the flash icon and then creating a new set weekday automation. The trigger will be whenever any property is added. And what we want to do in this case is we want to first define a variable. And this will be our weekday. Perfect. Weekday. Amazing. And then we click on formula. And our formula will be that what we want to do is we want to go from based on our trigger page, and we want to look at the connected weekdays, right? That's our relation. And in this relation, we want to find a value. We want to find the value where the current name, right? So the name of the day in the weekdays database, so Monday, Tuesday, and so on, equals the day of the entry that we look at. So the day of the entry that we look at is on trigger page, and then dot the date that we've set here. And that, of course, gives us a date, right? It doesn't give us Monday and so on. So we need to still format it. So format date. And then we can say format date to 4 small d's. This gives me the same weekday, right? So you need to, of course, match that. And this will return this one entry that we need to connect it. So then, after we've done this, we can then go to our actions and say, okay, please now edit a property, edit my weekdays relation, and set it to a custom formula, set it to weekday, right? I get now here the variable from before, and I can now update it. And I could also like go even one step further, where I could also say like update the name of the page as well, but we can leave that as is for now, right? We can simply create this. And now what happens is if we click on the new journal entry, right? We see, okay, should have actually set this to open, my bad. So need to update it, right? Previously told you always have the open step, otherwise you get this confusing UI that we just had where it doesn't open. So open it inside peak, perfect, click on done. Let's do this again, right? So we create a new journal entry, and now we see currently all our weekdays are connected, but in a second the automation should run, and it should now pick the one weekday that actually is connected. In this case, right, we still need to write in the day here, right? This day, right? But we see it picked now Saturday. Perfect. So that works, and then we could expand the automation, right, with one more step and say, okay, actually, when you do this, don't just connect that. Also set the the name of our page, right? Where's our here? Please set this and set this to weekday dot name, right? So just that we have always like Monday, Tuesday, and so on in there. Click on save, test this again, right? Click another journal entry, and again, wait for a moment while it searches through all these entries, picks the right day, and then should also fill out the name here. Pretty cool workflow, and again, right, it works with these limited setups, so you have like a limited number of things to search through. So perfect, Saturday, perfect. But if you have like hundreds of tasks or thousands of them, it works still in theory, but you will probably crash your Notion in the process. If you're using Notion together with others, for example, to run your business, a few new challenges come up. So here are some essential tips on how to use Notion in a team environment. Number 83, have a Notion champion. This is super important when you use Notion in a team setting. Because at the end of the day, Notion is software. And when you have software, someone needs to keep it up to date. And particularly in this context of Notion, right, where you have on the one hand, someone who just needs to keep up with all the updates and make sure that things, when you have new features or better solutions, that they get implemented. That's the one thing. But the other thing, which is pretty much as big, is that with a tool where pretty much anyone can build their own stuff, if you use it together in a company, someone needs to call the shots, right? In a Notion company setting, it's not the same as when you set up your own Notion for your personal use cases. So you need to make sure that someone aligns everyone and makes sure people make the right compromises, you have the right underlying system, and that, everyone pulls in the same direction. Otherwise, you will end up with a really disjointed piece of mess, right? I've never seen a company run successfully where everyone just does their own thing without, one person who sort of owns Notion. Which is why whenever we do any of our consulting projects, right, we always figure out, who are the people in the company who, once we leave, will be the ones who take over, right? And make sure that everything continues smoothly. So make sure if you plan to use Notion in your business or in your company, to pick one Notion champion. It shouldn't be the founder. It shouldn't be someone in, the highest management position. Maybe that's the champion in the beginning, right? Who helps, get everyone convinced and roll out a tool. But someone else will have to take that over as at least part of the day job. 84, use user groups for global access management. This is probably the first thing you should set up if you open a new Notion workspace for a company. And if you haven't done it yet, then after you finish watching this video, I would say this is the first step to take. Basically, what you want to do is when you use Notion with several people, you have to set up user groups to easier manage the access rights. Because as you know, right, on any Notion page, you can always click on share and you see, who all has access to this Notion page. You can add team members to this. You can, have different team spaces. And here, same, right, on a team space, you can always click on the three dots and say, add members, or on the team space settings, figure out, who is currently in this team space. And that's a great start. But the biggest mistake that people make in the beginning is that they add people individually. And that's not scalable. So instead, what you should do is you should go to settings. And then here under people, you see you have currently your members. And then under groups, you can set up certain user groups. And I just have some example user groups here, right, for the different departments. How many you need will depend on your specific situation, but you should have at least two. You should have at least users and admins. And then you go in, right, and you add all the people to that. And then whenever you give any permissions on any page, you never give it to the individual person, you always give it to the group, right? So for example, if you say here, right, this is a good example. On this page, right, is the home page, we don't want anyone to be able to edit it. So I would go to share settings, and I want to say, people in HQ, they don't have full access, right? They only have can comment access, right? That's the only thing. Only can comment everywhere. But then the admins, they should have full access, right? So instead of adding the admins individually, I will just go to admins and say the admin user group, well, they are the ones with full access. And now if anyone gets added to admin, they have access, and if I remove them from it, they lose it. And that just means I have one single place where I need to make any change rather than going into, my 50 different pages where I have set up these user rules and then remove, John when he's no longer an admin, or add Lisa once she becomes an admin. And the same of course is true with all the other things, right? Imagine HR, someone moves to HR, you need to give them access to all the HR pages or remove them from it. You're probably going to miss something, and it's just really annoying work. So make sure that you can manage all your user rights from one single place with the use of user groups. 85, lock down your global databases. Just like with individual workspaces, we of course want to have also here our few master databases in our backend, but we need to take it one step further. We need to lock them down. Because after we set up our, complex projects databases, we want to make sure that not every team member can change the structure of it. They should be able to add entries, right, and modify these entries, but they should not be able to, add 10 more, unnamed comment properties, right? That's not what we want. So in order to avoid it, we need to go onto every database, and we only need to set it up once. But we need to go on every database in a full page view, go to share, then here in the share settings, right? Currently, everyone at MF Consulting has full access. That's not what we want. We want to reduce this to can edit content. Can edit content, as you see, allows them to edit the entries, but not the structure of the database. So we're going to make sure we do this, right? We restrict the access to this. So on both these entries, we need to go in and say, can edit content, can edit content, can edit content. And then, because we of course want admins to be able to override this, we go in and add back our admin user group, right? And here we can now click on and say admins actually should have full access. And that way, right, with just a few clicks per database, you make sure that your structure is protected, everyone can still fully use it, and admins can modify it when needed. Number 86 is all about making your central pages a lot more secure and useful. Remember that we always want to build dashboards for people to interact with our information rather than just work on the main databases. Well, that poses an additional challenge when we do it in a team environment. Because here, we of course, if this page is shared between several people, someone might accidentally change something for others that he wasn't supposed to change. For example, he might accidentally delete a button, right? Or just start writing some random text in the middle. And again, since this is a shared page and we took a lot of time to design this in the right way, we don't want this to happen. So what do we do? How can we share this with our team without them messing it up, basically? Well, one option, of course, would be to just lock the page. So you can go in the top 3 corners, right? Lock the page. And that now means no one can make any changes, including me, right? That means that stops all accidental changes, which is great, but it has 2 big drawbacks. The first one is we also can't make any changes to entries in databases. As you can see, right? I can try to drag this, but I would need to click into it and then go status in progress, right, to do this, which, loses kind of a lot of functionality for our Notion setup. That's the one drawback. And the other drawback is that people could just overwrite, right? Anyone can go back and unlock this page. So it stops, fat fingers and accidental deletes, but doesn't stop someone who, just wants to change something, but you don't want to allow it. So what can we do instead? Well, user groups and access rights is the answer again. We go to share. And now we first make sure that everyone on this workspace only has the can comment access, right? Can comment should be the only thing that they're allowed to do. And that means that instead of being able to, change anything here, they could only leave me a comment that they would like this modified. So that's step 1. That basically replicates the lock setting for everyone else but for me. But that still means that they can't, just drag and drop the database entries. In order to allow for that, we actually need to give them can edit content rights for this database. But weirdly enough, right, if we are here, we don't see this option, because this option only shows up if we have a database open as a full page. So in order to do this, let's click on the 6 dots next to a linked view on this dashboard, say open this page, and now we see that we can now, if we go in here, we could say can edit content rights. So let's do that. Let's give them can edit content rights. So they can go back to, do that. Of course, if you had user group set up, you would already go in, right, and just give your general user group can edit content. And that way we can now, we are now in a situation where they can't change anything about the page structure, but for the specific database view, right, they can start dragging and dropping these things around. And the good thing about it is that we can even do that on a per view level. So maybe we actually don't want them to modify pin projects, right? Here they should only be able to look at it, but maybe we want to allow them to do this for marketing tasks, right? So then you would go in, right, and would do that separately for this one. 87, build an employee directory database. While you won't have to do a lot of work with an employee directory base, right? It's mostly set it up, forget it, and then just use it as a supporting database. It is still very essential to most of the company builds that we do. Because, as we mentioned earlier, with Notion database automations, they're a bit limited, right? They can't do a lot of search steps. We often still need external automation tools to do things. In that case, we need some source of truth in Notion, right, that tells us, okay, what person, belongs to which department, for example, and what is their Notion account, right? Notion, unfortunately, doesn't expose the sort of user database as a simple database that we can create and then reference. So we're going to set it up manually. Basically, you can, set it up with as many fields as you want, right? You typically would, of course, connect it to your team, so to your department, so you can track, okay, who works where. You might want to, include general information like email, the office location. You can even use this for company bios, right? So more as a team culture element, super useful for that. And then you want to always have the Notion account as a person property, right? A simple person. And here you would always then click in there and just select that person's Notion account. And that will, for a lot of more advanced automations, allow us to go in and look up, okay, for a certain task, okay, if we want to figure out who to assign this to, right? So for example, one thing that we do is, since we have typically setups where we have our different departments, right, and then we want to be able to click into sales, right? We want to be able to say, okay, on sales, okay, what are all the tasks, project, and so on that are currently on for the sales team? But we don't have one that people have to fill it out manually. So we have an automation running that assigns this automatically, and that's just one of many examples, right, where we need this Notion account employee directory database. Number 88, set a default assignee in the person property. If you don't want any unassigned tasks in your system, you can go on any person property, for example, in task on responsible, right? Click on here, say edit property, and there's a default option. And you can say, by default, set it always to the person who created it. And you see now, every task is automatically assigned to me as the person who initially updated it. Can be super helpful, right? Some teams, in particular, if you are, like in agile development, you might not want that, because we might want to be able to create a lot of tickets and assign them only later. But for most other situations, right, it's good to always have a person responsible there, so you don't have any empty things and do any other workarounds to make sure that they still show up properly on your pages. 89, use me filters to build personal dashboards at scale. Dynamic dashboards are one of my favorite things in Notion. We've already built previously ones, right, for our project. So we just went in and said everything that is related to this project, please show that. But now, how do we do this for individuals? Well, For individuals, we can use something in Notion called a me filter, and it's absolutely amazing. So here we have a dashboards database, and we can see that one of our templates is our individual contributor dashboard. So let's just look at this. Very simple, right? It's just a very base setup. And we see we pull in projects, tasks, and docs, so all our core elements in the system. And in order to show always the correct ones to the user, we have a filter. And we say on this filter, show everything where responsible contains me. And that way, you only have to set up this template once, then everyone in your company can duplicate it and will automatically be updated for them. So you don't need to build a dashboard for every single person. You build it once and then it will automatically, refresh. So basically the me filter means that whoever is logged in and looks at this page sees only their tasks. One other side note, as you can see, this filter here is a bit expanded. If you don't go here, right, on responsible and say, okay, by default, always have a created by, right, which means that responsible is always filled. If you don't do this and responsible might be empty, then you need to, make this filter a bit more robust and need to say, okay, either responsible should contain me, or in case responsible is empty, show me this task if created by contains me, right? And this way you have this fallback that nothing that gets created on a databases is lost, right? Very, very important when you use this combination of databases in the backend and dashboards on the front end, that nothing can fall through the cracks, that everything always gets displayed on the dashboards. Number 90, use a team database to quickly build team dashboards. By now, you know that I love building these dynamic dashboards where you only have to put the work in once and then it just auto-generates. So to complement, right, our projects dashboards that we already know and our now individual user dashboards, let's just look at team dashboards. Again, similar concept, right? We have one central database for teams. We connect teams to all the other elements in our setup, right? Docs, projects, tasks, and so on. And we go in and we create a template. And this template, we simply say, okay, we use the same self-referential principle, right, with terms of filters as we did on the project dashboards. We pull in all the related entries, and then we say, please show me everything where the team contains new team. And that way, right, we have no issue with adding new teams. With just one click, we can generate these dashboards. Makes it super quick and easy, in particular in the beginning of you using Notion. Because if you need to adapt this dashboard, right, if you need to add new elements to it, it's just one click on a general template, and then you can use our reload template trick, right? Remember, if you go in there and you delete everything from the page body, you can reapply it, and then with just 2 clicks, right, you have the new team dashboard rolled out to everyone in the company. Number 91, make use of Notion's information option. This is a simple but very helpful UI best practice. In Notion, whenever you have a database with your properties, if you click on the property, you can click on this eye icon to add a description. So you can say something, like the person who has to do the task. I mean, here it's pretty obvious, right? But basically what you then get is this little tooltip. And if you hover over it, it shows this context, which is also happening if you open the entry itself, right, and then hover over there. And that's really, really powerful, particularly if you have long database properties, with a lot of information and you just want to provide additional context, right? For example, sizing, right? Like, what does that actually mean? Which sizes do you have? So go to edit property, right, and explain that, they should pick, pick M as default, as if it's quicker tasks, and so on, right? You get the gist. And then you have just more context and make it easier for people to fill out these properties. Number 92, use the page settings hack for better UI. This is one of my favorite underrated Notion tricks right now, and basically allows you to create context menus in Notion. So let's say, right, we have a fairly complex setup in our company wiki with a lot of options for people to do, right? And what we can do is, rather than just having them rely on all the properties, right? So you see there are 16 more properties to set all different types of information. Rather than having them, go through all these elements, what we can do is we can add a toggle to the page called page settings, or whatever you wanted to do. And then just like you expect in an app, right, you can open that and then you can take certain actions. And you can really model this after the UI, right, in apps, right? Like similar to Notion UI, right? When you click on the 6 dots, right, and you get options to do things. So here we can manage general information. And you see I get additional context on what I can do here. And then what it does, it pulls in the specific entry I'm looking at, right, our processes. And then I have just the properties that I want to edit based on the information here. For example, right, if I want to ask team members for feedback, right, let's just open this full page. We can open this one, and then I can see, okay, please add the team members input required, right? So I can click in here, add other people. I can say, okay, please provide it by 22nd, and just, then close the toggle off again. Or I can pin it for quick access, and every time when I just see that entry and the corresponding property. Now, well, how do we do this? It's fairly straightforward. What we need to do is we need to create an additional property on our database, which is a help property. In this case, I name it dashboard helper, but you can call whatever you want it. And this is a relation to this database itself, but only a one-way relation. And as you can see, this is always set to the entry itself, right? So custom FAQs, oops, sorry, that is the actual entry that we're looking at there. And then what we do is we create a database automation. that sets this. So whenever we add a page, we connect the page to itself. And this then allows us to use self-referential filters, right? Our favorite 3 words. So we see if we create a new node, the way this is set up in page settings is we go in there and we say, okay, from the wiki, create a wiki database. So this is the link view of the whole database, but then filter it only for that one entry, right? That is set in dashboard helper. And that allows us to edit Notion database properties within the context of the actual page, which is super, super useful, right? You can use it just like for page settings, but you can expand on it, build on it, right? And for example, references at any other point down below in the page, right? For example, if you have meetings also, or like clients, right? You could just in here now reference any property from the main element, which makes it super, super useful. Number 93, use my process page 101 layout. When it comes to building better processes in Notion, I love to use something called the TTTR framework, which basically breaks down any process in your company in its 4 core components. And this is particularly useful for these type of processes where you have internal teams that get a lot of requests from other teams in the company, for example, design. But you can also use it slightly adapted for any process with external stakeholders. So how does it look like? Well, the first T stands for take input, the second for triage information, then take action, and then report result. And looking at an example, what it basically means, take input is someone asks you, please can you create this asset for a new feature launch? Triaging information means that you internally add additional context to this, right? What do we need to prioritize this? What size it is? Who is the best person on our team, right, to do this? Taking action is then, of course, adding into your project management and, doing the job. And then last but not least, reporting the result, right? Going to the person again and saying, here's what we did. And we can actually map this into this nice little 4-quadrant matrix based on whether it is about knowledge or actions versus external or internal, right? We have the external Notion part where we need to get information from outside. Then we need to add our internal Notion, our internal knowledge. Then we need to take internally action, and then we need to give it to them so that someone externally can take action. And we can now take this framework, right, and then look at, okay, how do the different Notion blocks actually map here? And it's super simple, right? We have take input, of course, with Notion forms. Then we can use the new Notion database layouts and our database views and dashboards to triage the information. And then last but not least, we can use some automations to help us take action quicker and report results. So much for the theory. So now let's look how this process 101 can map to Notion in the actual Notion setup. Just like for dashboarding 101, right, we had our 2 standard layouts. We have the same for processes, or more precisely for taking this initial input for processes. The one is where we have 2 columns at the very top and where we sort of visualize the workload so that if someone requests something, they have an idea of, okay, when can I expect this? Then we can embed the form view, and we can show my submissions. This is best on smaller screens, right? If most of the people in your company work on laptops, this is perfect. If you have more screen real estate, right, then you can also opt for this secondary layout where you have the form view on the left and then the other things on the right, which is really, really nice. But particularly, right, if you have a smaller screen, right, you see now if I just get the sidebar in here, that gets quite tight quite quickly. So make sure that you pick the right one for who will actually use this. But then this is the perfect starting point. So let's see how an example filled can look like. On the left, we have our form, right, which allows people to quickly enter any new requests for specific designs. And then on the right, we can see, okay, this is our upcoming workload. And we simply take this request database, right, and we visualize it based on the due dates people have requested. And then we can see, okay, we have a lot of work coming up in this week, but then afterwards it gets better. And then down below, we see our requests here, right, for and can track without any other additional help, whether the team has already started working on it. And then we can create a different dashboard for our internal team to work on this, right? The one view is for the externals, right? Or for the other team members to submit these requests. And this is then the view where we can modify it, right? Where we can say, okay, we want a view of our inbox where all the things come in and we only show entries where we haven't assigned these internal information, right? Who is supposed to do it and what is the size. We can show that on a database, right? So we can add it directly from here. And this makes it really, really smooth to manage these workflows. Number 94, create a page for your company health check. The management and your Notion champions, of course, need a way to somehow monitor the system health, right? And see, okay, is our workspace actually used the way we want it to be used? And are there any trends that we need to, fight or combat? And one great way is to set up one of these health pages where you basically pull in through charts data for the most important metrics. Which ones these are will depend on your company. So this is just an example, right? And here, what we want to visualize is, okay, how many tickets were created last month? So how many tasks were entered? And this basically break it down first by person on the left and then by sort of departments on the right. And this allows us to quickly at a glance see, okay, who are the people who use the workspace the most, right? And who are the ones that maybe need some help. It doesn't mean that they don't use the workspace, right? Maybe they just get a lot of things assigned, but it's something where we might want to like reach out to them and ask them whether they need any additional help. Say for teams, right, we can quickly see which teams use Notion a lot and which teams don't use it so much. We can then also break it further down, right, with just like the total numbers and see how many tickets did we actually complete, right? So do we just enter a lot of data, or do we actually also work towards completion, right? We can also could visualize it then over time if we care about it. We can see how many of our tasks are overdue and which ones we have without a due date, right? So this specific example is from a workspace where we use an agile work methodology. So there's a ton of tickets that don't have a due date assigned yet, right? Because the sprints haven't started. But in other companies, right, this might be a big warning sign if you have like a lot of items without a due date assigned. And for example, just, to show something else, right, for like other entries, meeting load, right? You could then see, okay, how many meetings did you have last month? Like, how is the trajectory going, right, over different weeks? But you can do that then for all the key entries, right? You could add it for docs, you could add it for projects, whatever you as a company decide are like the most important metrics to track that your, sort of internal productivity stays on track. You can create and visualize them in Notion to make sure you have one simple place to go to and see at a glance whether you're on the right track. Number 95, use automations to notify key stakeholders. This actually ties into our previous element, right, around processes, where we say, okay, we have, we have a form to collect these design requests, right, and then we track that internally. And one thing that we can then also automate is when things move to the next stage, right, or are completed, let's notify everyone who cares about this so they don't need to constantly follow up with us. To do so, super simple, right? Another database automation. We have it set up here already, and we say, okay, whenever the status is set to complete, then please send a notification to, and then we can pick the person property. So whoever, initially submitted this will get a notification, and we can also customize it right here. We just finished it, but we can actually like pull in information. So we can say we just finished and then press add and say from the trigger page, we want, the actual name. So they will, whatever they requested, right, they will see it here. They can, have a link if they wanted to jump right back there. And that works both for internal things, right? So people that are with you in the workspace, but also if you collect that from external stakeholders, right? So if someone else outside your company requests something, well, you could simply add the send mail to option, right? And use that to notify someone. Or if you need to build it even more complex, right, you could use a webhook to trigger that. Number 96, send daily or weekly task reminders. You already have that structured information in Notion, so let's put it to good use. Here's an example of an email that you can then generate based on the tasks that you have in Notion. So you can send everyone in your team an overview, right, of how many tasks they have overall for the week. And then, starting from Monday throughout the week, they see this nice little progress bar at the top to motivate them and keep going. And you can list out all the tasks where they come from, right, if they are in different areas or whether they are about different projects. Pretty much anything, right? This is an HTML email. You can design it however you want, and you then feed it based on the structured data in your Notion setup. Number 97, connect Notion to GitHub. This requires you to have an ID property on your Notion database. And you see, this is just a sample setup, right? And we have the ID here, and you can add this new property type, which is a GitHub pull request. And then you authorize GitHub. And after that, if you use the ID of the ticket in your in the name of a ticket pull request in GitHub, it will automatically connect it. And not only do you see, okay, that, this is open and you can hover over it to get some more information, you can also go to your GitHub property and you can set it up to automatically change the status that you have in Notion based on whether certain actions have happened in GitHub. And last but not least, if you open in GitHub, you will see like if there are any comments or like any history, and any actions in your pull request will show up as comments on your task in Notion. Number 98, say goodbye to chaotic folder structures with a G Drive sync. You definitely don't want to use Notion as a replacement for your file storage, but you can use the capacities of Notion with a database to organize all your information by combining it with something like Google Drive. This is a simple automation that watches all your files in a specific Google Drive folder and then checks Notion whether that already exists in your company wiki, and if it does, it just updates it with the corresponding information. Otherwise, it will add it to Notion. And that means you can then use a database in Notion, for example, the company wiki, to organize it, to tag it, right, to connect it to all your projects and tasks, and you simply have a link so that you can view it in your proper shared drive. Super efficient automation and much better than uploading something to Notion directly, because Notion is not that great with handling files, right? You have to always download them to interact with them. Overall, not the best experience, but with this, you get the best of both worlds. Number 99, watch my Notion for Business setup video for a complete build-along. And if you need some help with your Notion setup for business, don't worry. I'm a certified Notion consultant, and my team and I work around the clock to help companies implement better systems and build Notion setups that actually work. You can learn more about it on my website at matthiasfrank.de/Notion Consulting or with a link in the description. We've seen a lot already, but now it's time to push Notion to the limits. Here are my favorite tips to supercharge your Notion setup. All right, we are crossing to number 100 with this master tag database. Whenever you have any type or category in Notion that applies to not just one database, but to several databases, you will not use a select property and instead use a separate database with these tags. This is a system called global tags. I have a full video for you linked in the description that it goes over all the details, but just to very quickly touch on the huge benefits. Let's say, right, you have your writings and you want to categorize them across certain categories, like for example, remote work. And then you have some books also, right, that you read on these topics. Well, if you have select properties, then this is all independent from each other, right? Like the tag, you can't really pull it together. You need to manage them in both places separately. And for every tag that you have, you need to build then a complete overview that shows, like for that individual tag individually. However, if you use global tags, that means you can connect both of them, right? And then you can just open that topic. And here you can use, again, like a dynamic self-referential filter to pull in all the related entries, which means whenever you add a new tag, right, and apply it, you automatically have this dashboard built from scratch for you. What's more, you can also use it to pull in related entries. So not just can you go, on remote work and see all the writings and readings, you can go on any writing, right? So for example, the benefits of journaling for personal productivity, knowledge management, right? You can apply our standard template. And now if we add any of our global tags, for example, the remote work one, right? It will automatically pull in all the related readings that we've had so far on this topic in a moment. It takes sometimes a second to load. So let's just give this page a quick refresh, and then we'll have all the readings that we have there. Oops, doesn't reload. There it is. And we have all the readings that we have from in our knowledge base automatically popping up here. Super powerful, not possible if you use the normal select properties instead. 101 is all about showing your next task in line with formulas. Another example of why it's really worth to learn Notion formulas to get your Notion game to the next level. And that is that, for example, on projects, you could show the next task in line. And that's dynamic, right? So if we then check off certain things, right? Currently it shows me, the update websites with template on the 18th. Well, if we say that this is now done, right, it will automatically update to show me the 117 Notion tips video instead, together with the due date. Now, how is this built? Well, let's take a look. So I have a full video also linked in the description for that. But basically what we want to do is we want to grab our tasks, and on that we want to find the entry where the due date equals the one with the earliest open due date, right? So in order to do so, we filter our task relation. We want to first filter out everything that is done. Then we grab an array of our due dates and we sort it in order to then grab the first entry, right? Which means we get the earliest not yet completed task. And then we use just this statement, right, to render it like this. We could also just output the task itself, right? If we don't care about the due date, lots of things that you can do with it. But one more reason, right, to make sure that you understand Notion formulas and can write them because they are so powerful. 102, auto update project statuses. This is a nice quality of life automation for your project management. For example, you might want to make sure that whenever you start working on tasks for a project, you automatically shift the status right to in progress. Any other way around, when you have any project, you want to make sure that once you set it to finish, it closes off all remaining tasks. Well, doing so is fairly straightforward. So on tasks, we want to have an automation that says start project. And basically, whenever we set the status of any task to in progress, we want to first define variables. This helps us grab the linked project. And then we want to say edit in, and as you remember from before, right, it allows us to pick that specific project and say, well, we want to change the status to in progress. And vice versa, right, on the project database, we set an automation that says, okay, whenever you set the status of the project to complete, please grab the task, right? Same define variables approach, and then set all of these to done. Very small automation, but again, saves you a few clicks every day you use the system, which makes it more likely that your team will properly adopt it. Number 103, use webhooks for better Slack notifications. In theory, Notion has a built-in integration with Slack in order to, use database automations to send a notification in a channel. But it's not very good because you can't customize the message at all. But with the new Notion webhooks, you can actually do that. So what you want to do is you want to, whatever you want to notify people of in Slack, you want to set a webhook that has these conditions, right? So in this case, it would be whenever we start work on a project, maybe you want to inform people that this is now happening, right? And then we send a webhook. Then we want to use an app, for example, make.com, or in this case, the example I want to show is Relay, amazing automation tool. And what we basically just do is we receive the webhook here, and then we can send a message to our Slack channel. And here, since we use an in-between tool, we can customize it to whatever we want, right? We can send whatever information we have, right? So this is for a different webhook example where we say, okay, whenever we close a new client, right, we can say, okay, we just closed, the client plain text and just signed for, whatever number we have in there. So we can design it however we want it. We can even add actions to it, right? Add links to it. Much more powerful than the default options. 104. Send yourself push notifications on your phone. Notion's own notifications are often not the best, particularly when it comes to push notifications on your phone. But with this method, you can set up whatever you want and customize it fully to your needs. Full tutorial for this in the description. Number 105. Send structured reports using your Notion data. I already showed you a similar example to this with the weekly tasks. But since it's such a powerful but so underused use case for data in Notion, I want to have a different example too. So let's say, for example, you run a VC fund, right? And you need to report regularly to your different partners how things are going and what you've actually did, right? Now, you have that data on a Notion project because you're tracking your meetings, you're tracking your tasks. So why not create, like one of these automated reports? You can include any sort of free text fields, right? You can like pull in, for example, in this case, right, like assets under management, like the current values. You can report on, which meetings you did and which ones you actually attended, right? You can also show them all. We would really need more, support from you. Show the open tasks, show missed tasks, right? Break it down into yours, into theirs. Doesn't matter, right? Like whatever you have as structured information, if you need to put somewhere else after you put already into Notion, you don't have to do it manually. You can set up automations and reports to do it on autopilot. And of course, you can also do it for personal use cases, right? For example, if you run something for a local community and you want to inform them over the things that happen, right? Decisions that were made. Again, if it's tracked in Notion, you can very easily create these automated reports that get sent out without any additional effort. Number 106. Sync Notion databases for granular permissions. One of Notion's biggest weaknesses is that you can still not share a subset of a database with someone, right? If you want to, for example, have Notion and you use it for your agency and you have a bunch of freelancers or clients and you want to share only the tasks that relate to them with them, you have a problem. Because you know now that you should have one single database. But since you can't say, okay, everything that is assigned to a certain person, just share that with them, it gets really tricky here. And there's no fully secure workaround that doesn't use any type of automation, right? You will need some extra work here. Now, one of the most powerful ways in the right situations is to sync two Notion databases, right? To have a master database and then have several public databases, for example, for client A, for client B, for client C, and then use a no-code automation like Make to sync entries from one database to another. I have a full tutorial that walks over the basic premise of this in the description. So if you're curious about that, definitely check that out. Number 107, use Softar to build client portals. Different solution to the same problem, right? So let's say we have clients and we need to share projects and tasks with them. Now, Softar is great for that because it allows us to build a small web app on top of our Notion data. So you see, this is like an app on the web. People can log in, they have their accounts, they're greeted by whatever their name is, and then we can use the underlying Notion data. So this is a project that lives in a Notion database, right, with the properties. They can actually submit new project requests that will update it in Notion. They can click into it, right, to see additional information. This is a very, very simple MVP, right? You can, of course, customize this further, but you see, similar to the way that you would click a Notion into a page and then have a dashboard of the tasks that belong to it, you have the tier here, we split down into tasks to be reviewed, right? And they can approve them with a single click. We have the tasks that are in progress and we have like completed tasks and so on. So really powerful solution, but again, right, requires a little bit of work initially to set up. However, if you need it for your business, well, then this can be a very interesting alternative. Number 108. Use rows to import your bank transactions. If you use Notion to track your finances, for example, your business cash flows or your just personal, net worth, then of course one annoying thing is having to manually enter all your expenses into your transactions. But you can use rows for this. Rows is an amazing spreadsheet tool that has a bunch of API connections. And one of these connections is the bank account connector. So you can use Plate, which is an open finance API, to connect to pretty much any bank. Like not all are supported, but a lot of them are. And that way you get read access to your transactions. You can then import them into your spreadsheet, right? So this is here some sample data where you've imported it into the rows spreadsheet. You could do it in any spreadsheet manipulation, but even better, you can then send that information to Notion, right? So there is a simple formula, again, like full video with the walkthrough in the description, because it's a bit involved initially to set it up. But once you do, it will automatically send all these transactions to Notion. So in real time, right, you get everything here and your whole Notion, setup will update whenever a new transaction comes in. Number 109, analyze your Notion data with pivot tables in rows. We talked about graphical or chart pivot tables, right, or fake pivot tables already earlier in this video. But what if you need a real one? Well, you can also do the sync to rows the other way. So this is a Notion database that gets synced from Notion to rows. So whenever a new row gets added in my Notion database, it pops up automatically here in the spreadsheet. And then since this is a spreadsheet, I can create an actual pivot table, right, with also like several analytics and metrics at once, right? Like whatever you would do with a pivot table, you can do here. And then you can grab this and you can embed it. You can embed it back into your Notion page, right, with the URL. So then your pivot table lives next to your Notion database. And then again, right, anything updates in the underlying database, your pivot table automatically updates, and you see the changes basically in real time on your system. 110, add pretty much any kind of information without typing to Notion. This is a workflow that I personally use all the time for my business to keep track of my expenses. So what I have is, this is built in Relay, but you could build it also in other tools. Whenever a file is added to my expense folder in G Drive, it triggers. And then we prompt ChatGPT and we ask it, well, you're an expert personal assistant who excels at extracting information from invoices. You will review the attached invoice and extract the following data. Right? What is it about? From who is the invoice? What's the amount and what's the date? And then when we do this, we can then pass this into Notion and create in Notion a new expense automation. So same idea, right, as with importing transactions from rows to Notion. We can use this to capture anything else, right? Either because we can't connect our whole bank account, or because we have certain credit card statements, right, where we don't have like the different we don't want to get totals but the individual line items. This is a great way to do this to make sure everything that you have goes into Notion. And you can expand this workflow, right? It doesn't have to be about finances. Whatever you have as data, right, in a PDF, in a screenshot, you can use this to automatically add it to Notion. Could be medical reports, could be, like your grades from school. You don't have to type, right, to add information to Notion. AI and automations can do that on autopilot. Now, these two aren't really tips on how to supercharge Notion, but I realized that I forgot to include them earlier, and who's going to recount every single step. So, tip number 111 and 112 is to track changes and to use search and replace. Let's say I'm reviewing this email here, right, and I want to give some feedback to the person who wrote it. Instead of just like changing things directly, right, or writing comments with it, I can also track changes. To start it, I can either, like, if I highlight anything, I can click on this icon for suggest edit, or I can click on the three dots and then say here that I want to suggest edits. And then you get this little bubble at the top that, indicates that you're suggesting things, which means, for example, if I delete something, right, it's still on the page, but I get it like with strike through and like this comment like thing here on the side. If I, any other headline, question mark, right, if I have that here, right, I really get similar track changes experience as I would get in Google Docs or Word, of course, in a bit simpler level. Now, these changes, right, I can then either accept them, then they happen, or I can deny them, in which case it goes immediately back. Very useful, and if I want to exit it mode, I simply click on X here, and I'm back to making edits directly, right? So this, of course, doesn't get tracked. The other thing, search and replace, right, can be launched by simply pressing Command F, and you now you see find, replace, and ask. So, for example, with webhooks, I see I actually want to capitalize it, so let's search for webhook. And then we see that we can now opt here to expand this and say we want to replace webhook with webhook. And then we can say, okay, replace all. And now that makes all the small ones, right, capitalized. And now I have it properly spelled everywhere. Pretty cool. Next, let's look at Notion AI. Notion AI has come a long way since the initial release. In the beginning, it was more of a nice to have. But now there are a few really, really powerful workflows, if you know how to use them. We kick things off with tip number 113 and dictation. To trigger this, simply press Command O. And now you see I have here the little nosy from Notion who will listen to everything I say. And in real time, most of it is, right, it will start transcribing what I talk to. Very useful if we don't want to use, either the default dictation on our system because it's not as accurate as AI, or we just need to quickly write very long text, right? Like speaking is still faster than typing. Even if you type very, very fast, you probably get far beyond like 120 words per minute, even if you don't speak as fast as I do. But yeah, pretty accurate. Absolutely love it. Very, very powerful. And then whenever we're done, right, we simply stop it and then we can start editing our text like usual. 114 is all about creating databases in seconds. I use this all the time to create sample data for my videos, but you can also use it to actually create databases for your system. Now, by the time that you watch this video, Notion might have even launched already their AI assistant to create databases directly. They have launched some alpha of that, but if it's not out yet, you can use this workaround still, right? You can simply start Notion AI and now ask it, please give me a simple table for CRM, include properties for all the typical things I need to track in an enterprise sales cycle, add at least 2 rows of sample data. Of course, right, if you know exactly what database you want, right, you will just tell it to please create it with these and these properties. But if you don't, you can write this type of prompt. You can hit enter, and then in a second, it will get you this simple table. Now, this is not a database yet. It is just a simple table. But that's not a problem. We will just accept this. Perfect. Thank you. And what we can now do is we can first say, please use a header row, right? This is our titles. And then we can click on the three dots and say, turn into a database. And so within seconds, right, we have a database. We, of course, need to then update the properties. So we need to set that as well. This should be, an email property instead of simple text and so on. But still, very, very fast to set it up with a schema. And if you don't know exactly what properties you should track, it's a great starting point. 115 is about extracting text from images. This is particularly useful if you don't want to build a full automation, right? Like the one with Relay that I showed you before. You can just use Notion AI. So you can launch it here, right? Now you can add here, attach any type of file and simply ask it, please extract whatever information I need. It will do that. You can copy it and add it to your page. So a little bit more manual than the fully automated way, but still great to get information quickly out of PDFs or screenshots. Number 116 allows you to chat with PDFs. This, of course, works pretty much the same way, right? Launch Notion AI here, upload your PDF or documents, and then ask any questions about it that you need to answer. With 117, you can create flowcharts in Notion. This is perfect to visualize any kind of process very quickly in Notion because you don't need any other tool, right? You can create these flowcharts right here in the app. And of course, you could write the Mermaid code yourself. You don't technically need AI for it, but it's so much easier. Particularly, if like me, you don't exactly know the syntax. So all we need to do is we have our process here lined out, right? This is for petting a cat. I will highlight everything. I will press Command J, and then I will ask AI, can you please turn this process into a mermaid chart? And then in a second, right, this will start thinking and will then create me a mermaid chart based on my instructions. And then we can insert this right below, can accept it. And now you see right here, this visualization of the process right in here. We have like our options. We even have a loop, right? You can then see like how this code looks, right? If you switch from mermaid to the actual code, this is what, like the mermaid code looks like. But yeah, super simple, quickly create any kind of progress or process flowcharts right in Notion. Number 118 is all about hiring a personal assistant. This is a workflow that I use personally all the time to help me categorize the transactions that I pull in via rows and via the credit card automation into Notion, right? Where all my transactions are stored. But in that flow, right, we don't have the categories yet to then break it down into our actual spending habits. So what we can simply do is we can, on our transactions, right, create a select property. And here I have created, some sample categories to help us break it down. And what we then want to do, rather than doing this automatically and manually, we will set up an AI autofill. So here we can tell it, please, AI autofill this property. On a tag property, you then have the option whether it should generate no options. I would generally recommend to have this turned off because you probably want to determine, right, what it should pick from. Unless, of course, you say, like, it's so vast, right, and it will, have to come up with new things. Otherwise, this is my preferred option. Then I always go on more to specify the prompt. So first, we want to auto-update on page edits in general. Yes, probably if we change these things, but here it's actually fine, right? It just needs to do this once. We can leave this off. And now what I will tell it, you are an expert personal finance assistant. Your job is it to categorize the spending according to the available categories to help us analyze our spending habits. If you're not sure what category to pick other, right? I find it helps very much to give it the default option because sometimes you still have to modify, like what is picked, but by and large, it's pretty good. And then we can click on Save Changes, click on Try on this view, and then we'll see in a second it should start, categorizing first few ones here, right? And then if you want to have them all filled, you can always, click on these rows to tell it, well, please update it, or just say if you click on it, update all on the screen, right? Autofill all pages. Yes, please autofill all of them. And then in a second, we should see pizza, perfect, that's food, right? Yeah, our unicorn plushie collection, definitely other, maybe also fun, right? If you see also that it keeps categorizing some things wrong that should be categorized differently, then you can go in and, update the prompt so that it starts updating them specifically. Now they disappear, but after we refresh, it will all be back. So really cool use case to make sure you don't have to do this manually. 119 is about streamlining your AI workflows. If you have any recurring AI workflows, then this is really helpful. Let's say, for example, you have your help documentation in Notion and you've created a really long and thorough prompt to help your team quickly translate it into other languages, right? That can be quite helpful. So what we would want to do, instead of like just now manually having to, mark everything, pressing Command J and then inputting the prompt that we need to copy from somewhere, we can help our team by creating this AI prompt block. So what we want to do is we would want to go to the actual template. So I want to set up, like a new help doc, and then we can have our, standard, English version up here. And then after the divider, we can now add an AI block, right? So let's call this a custom AI block. Perfect. In here, we can now paste in our prompt. So I have like a very long prompt here already, prepared, and we'll add that in there. And then what we can do is we can simply close this. And whenever we apply this template now, right? So let's say we go here to our article, I copy my English one, apply the help docs, and then I'll add the English version here. You can now, like the person, right, who does this, can then simply click on generate and will execute that prompt block inside there, right? So it makes it easier to have these recurring things. You don't have to, keep copying them, and you can add them to your templates to make it easier for your team to use. Now to wrap things up, let's take a look at another Notion product, Notion Calendar, and what we can do to make the most out of this one. 120, connect all of your Google Calendars. To do so, simply click on Open Notion Calendar, then go into your settings at the very top, and then under your integrations calendars, you can add any number of Google Calendars to show them all at one glance. 121, how to connect other calendars to Notion Calendar. It's not the best workaround, but until Notion Calendar integrates with all the other tools, it's the best option that we have. So this will differ based on the calendar tools that you have. I'll leave a few other links down below. But basically for Apple Calendar, for example, what you want to do is you want to open it in Apple Calendar. And if you hover over it, right, so here my test calendar, you see there's this little person icon. I can click on that. And then I can say here, public calendar. Now with that toggled on, I will get a version. I will get a link of this that I can share, right? So if I right click this, sharing settings, you get then this cal link, and now you can head over to Google Calendar and import that, right, through adding it. And this will basically sync all the events that you have in your Apple Calendar into the Google Calendar, and that way it will also show in Notion Calendar. 122, use scheduling links. This is hands down my favorite feature of Notion Calendar. I use scheduling tools like cal.com, absolutely amazing, but sometimes I just need a few quick scheduling options. So all I need to do is press S, and now I can highlight availability in my calendar like this. And then I can just share this link with the other person. They can then book a meeting. Now, you see, you have here the options. Right? This is all in the past, so it actually doesn't show me anything. So now that I have some in the future, it gives me this link option, right? I can click on create, and then I can just share this snippet here with someone, and they can book a meeting. I can change the duration, right? Currently it's 30 minutes. I can change how much time in advance, like they can max book. I can even actually turn this into like a tool that can recurringly book things, right? So I could say this is actually, right now it can be used to book multiple meetings. So I can share it with several people. I can also say, well, this should only be used once. Plus, it allows me now to avoid conflicts, at least in one calendar. Again, not as thorough, right, and mature product as cal.com, where you can have several calendars to check for conflicts, but still very, very solid option in order to make sure that you can quickly schedule meetings without any additional, back and forth. Number 123, show your Notion database item in Notion Calendar. If you have any database in Notion that contains a date property, you can actually see that and overlay it in Notion Calendar. So to do so, we click here to create a new view, our calendar view. And here you see that you have now this option to open this specific one in calendar. Before you open it here, you can actually, if you wanted to set filters, try to only show certain entries out of it. But for me, I want to see everything here. So I will just click on open calendar. And this will now, automatically launch Notion Calendar. And we have added this now as the events database. Now it takes a second to load, but if I open my sidebar and reload this whole thing, then we'll start seeing them show up. And there they are. So now you can see my sample data here from the Notion database pops up as an overlay in Notion, right? It's currently all days events, and I can also see that it comes from my events database, right? If you sync several databases in here. And the cool thing is I can now, of course, reschedule them here, right? Which makes it much easier to time block, right? In Notion, it's a little bit annoying having to go into that, right? A lot of clicks. You need to, click into the entry, right? You need to say, okay, it's here. We need to include a dime, and so on and so on, right? That's pretty annoying. So rather here we can simply then drag it somewhere. We can make it, assign this specific date, right? Sometimes jumps back quickly for a second until the actually goes through. A little bit buggy sometimes, but for the most part, works really well. And then this, of course, syncs back to Notion, right? If I then look at my Notion entries, we see for the ones that I, time block, that time is also here. Now, it's not perfect yet. In particular, it's a bit annoying that I don't have the option to see any other properties in Notion, right? So if we have some toggles or so, or some checkboxes, I can't modify them here from calendar. I need to open it in Notion, but still, it's great to overlay. Just keep in mind that this doesn't actually sync with your Google Calendars, right? These entries are only visible in Notion Calendar. So if you have other things like, for example, cal.com as a scheduling tool running, they won't be able to respect these blocks. And number 124, attach Notion pages and quickly share them with one click. This makes it really easy to share meeting agendas or any other documents for a meeting with other people. So for this test meeting that I created, I can go in here now and under docs and links. Since I have my Notion connected, I can find all my Notion pages. I can search for a specific one. I can create a new one. I can also switch the workspace if I have several connected ones. And then what I can also do is right from this page, if I have other participants here, I can share that specific page with it. So I don't need to jump to Notion, make sure my shared settings are accurate. And if they use Notion Calendar as well, they will also see it in their little preview that there has been a document attached. Well, looks like the list grew beyond 117. But now I have to stop. Did you make it through the whole video? Then I have a favor to ask. Comment below and let me know which one was your favorite tip. And if you're not done yet and want to learn more, well, you know what's next. Here's my list of 99 Notion tips from last year. Most of them haven't made it into this video because it would have gotten simply too long. So just click here and I will see you in a second.